Hello everyone, and welcome to This Nintendo Life, episode 165. My name is NBZ, and I do not have the coronavirus, COVID-19, thankfully. Or maybe I do, who knows, maybe it's latent within my system. I'm joined by other people who may or may not be infected. As always, Bally joins me. Hi, Bally.
Hello, MVZ. Have you stocked up on bog roll? I know you're going back to your YouTube days. You were a big bog roll fan.
No, I mean, I always have a perpetual cold. This is the joke, and there's always toilet paper on my desk. We have, I think, enough probably in the house. I went to Tesco this morning, and it is the most ridiculous thing I've seen in my life. Like, I had to stand in a queue to get my stuff for like 25 minutes because all the queues were going down the aisles. This is a weird time we live in right now. So yeah, but I think we have enough stock, I guess. We'll see how it goes. Meanwhile, we're also joined by a guest on this episode. First time in a little while. We're joined by the man of 1,000 podcasts, Bill, aka Run Jump Stomp. Bill, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I thought it was just Americans that were idiots and stockpiling everything and buying everything. So it's not just us?
No, humanity is universal in its idiocy. Absolutely. So, yeah, just doing the same thing over here, apparently. Although I talked to my mum and she said that in Scotland it's empty when she went to the supermarket. So maybe the Scots have the smart ideas. I don't know. No idea what's going on. But yeah, Bill, we have... talked a little bit before. I was on a podcast with you a while ago. It was around Christmas a couple of years ago, I think. And then you had both myself and Bally on your guest show, 143 Pixels, the episode of mine which went up last week, which people can go and listen to, which was talking about Metroid Fusion, one of my favorite games of all time, which was a very good conversation. Do you want to tell people what you do, or the podcast you do? I said man of 1,000 podcasts because you do a lot of stuff, man.
Yeah, I have a problem in the idea that I have too many interests, and I keep making podcasts that are about niche things. So then I can't bring all of my interests into that niche thing. So then when I have another idea, I have to make another podcast. So I have Nintendo Switchcraft, which I started when they announced the Nintendo Switch. I have Run Jump Stomp, which is a general gaming podcast, which comes out. It doesn't have a schedule. It's just like, okay, I want to talk about this, and I have time to talk about this, so I'm going to talk about this. I have 143 Pixels, which your episode came out last week, like you said, and Bally's episode is going to come out as part of Season 3. And then I have StadiaCast, which is a podcast about Google Stadia. So I've got a bunch of stuff, and I'm going to start my COVID-19 podcast any minute now.
Yeah. Absolutely. Get on the hot trend.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So I don't know how you have the time to do all that, but it's very impressive. And as someone who also has way too many interests, I feel you. It's a hard life out there being a fan of things, in this day and age where there's just too much stuff to consume and enjoy. So yeah, we've got a good show today. We're going to do a couple of segments. Bally, do you want to lay out the plan for the show?
Sure. So our first segment, we're going to have a little bit of a discussion at the top of the show just about kind of E3 2020 getting cancelled. It's kind of a big story, so we're going to have a discussion about that. Then we are all going to be talking about the games that we have been playing. And then 2-segment show this week. Our second segment is going to be a discussion where we are going to devise a top 10 list of the top 10 most important games to Nintendo in the last decade.
Yep. There's lots of people going around being like, here's the best games of the last decade. I was like, we've talked about our favorite games a lot on this show. We do a top 50 games list. We do our top 10s at the end of the year and stuff like that. So I thought, why not take a bit of a different look at it in terms of, what were the things that mattered? What were the most important things for Nintendo as a company, business-wise, creatively? And we'll just kind of go around the table, each pitching and try and build a list together, which I think should be quite fun. But yeah, let's get into talking about E3 a little bit because, everything's getting cancelled in the wake of the novel coronavirus, and, people are staying indoors, and E3 was very much on the chopping block. I think the interesting thing about E3, right, is for a lot of the last kind of couple of years, people have been iffy about its relevance, about, what's the point of it being there? It seems to be more empty each year with the show floor. In terms of Microsoft, aren't even on the show floor anymore. They're in their own different area. Sony haven't been. They weren't there last year. They were planning to not go this year. And so it felt like it was kind of on its last legs. Ironically, here's one of those things I said years ago on the podcast, which is like Nintendo, are going to be the last manufacturer alive when it comes to consoles and stuff like that. Nintendo were literally the only major player of the big three on the show floor still, on the main show floor of E3. So despite people saying Nintendo aren't at E3 back when they shifted to Directs, they actually were the only ones now who are at E3, ironically enough. But how are you guys feeling about this? It's a weird thing, and I think like the coronavirus has come along and maybe kind of given them an excuse because, I am 8-Bit, who are the company who are going to do a lot of the show floor stuff to kind of revitalize E3. They dropped out. Jeff Keighley said he wasn't going to be going, and they didn't really cite the virus as a reason. They cited more like, hey, we didn't kind of align with what E3 was doing. So do we feel like E3's not going to come back next year? What do we think?
I think it probably will try to come back next year, but I think that it feels like that it's very easy when trends evolve and things change, that when you have an annual event like E3, that the ESA and its umbrella companies, as in like all the developers, major developers, it's very easy to just say, see you next year. And then if you just have that attitude over the last 10 years of see you next year, then when there are huge trends in the way that these shows change, it doesn't feel like the ESA and the big companies were, agile enough to change to the situation. And
right.
It might come as a blessing in disguise that something like coronavirus and this year being cancelled could be the rocket that changes that culture of continuing year on year. Because if you're forced to change, why change back? The whole reason they haven't changed so far, in my view, is because it is too much effort to change the relationship and say, you know what, let's not do next year the same way. Let's change it to do this, because it is too easy to just say, I'll see you next year. And without having that continuity, I think this could be the start of something really great in terms of what could change. Because even like Microsoft were clearly knew this announcement was coming and obviously had a heads up. And then you saw Phil Spencer literally 15 minutes after the announcement tweeting, well, Xbox, we're going to do a direct style stream and then
digital event. I think he said.
And I think that's really positive that they're going to be able to do that. And I do feel really sorry for a lot of the smaller indies where I think they just don't have the budgets to suddenly uproot and change their marketing plan in the space of a few months. And I know there's been a bit of a debate online about the importance of E3 to indies. And I think more or less it is a shade of grey where E3 is still a big deal for indies, but maybe not as big of a deal as certain other conventions. So it
seems to be more on the business end of them talking to people and making connections in the industry to get deals to happen. I think someone tweeted about, an indie meeting someone in a Giant Bomb green room and a deal happened because of that connection.
Exactly. So that physical interaction is 100% something that will be lost, but we've just got to keep moving forwards and see what other benefits going to a potentially all digital E3, if that's what comes of this in the future, will look like.
Yeah. I think a lot of the interactions that you guys are talking about can happen at GDC.
Right.
And E3
I mean, unfortunately, that was cancelled as well. But
not this year. Well,
yes.
Actually, GDC wasn't cancelled. It was delayed until summer, although I anticipate it's going to get canceled until next year.
Sure.
But I feel like the main difference between GDC and E3 is the fact that fans don't go to GDC. GDC is a conference for developers, and that is a great place for all of those interactions that you guys were just talking about to happen. And E3 has always kind of been more of a consumer conference, except for that 1 year where they said, nobody come, we're just doing hotel meetings or whatever.
Yeah.
And that was widely panned as kind of a disaster. I feel like E3 as a consumer conference where people go and play the games, I don't think that's coming back next year. I think that is gone, and we will go to an all-digital thing. And if I were in charge of the ESA, I would say, listen, we're going to have E3 next year. You're not going to come and have and waste a bunch of money on booth space and spend piles and piles of money on flying everybody out and building your booth and putting Mario up in the corner so it looms over everything like an angry god.
Right.
What you're going to do instead is tell us all of the announcements that or when you want to do the announcements, and we'll coordinate so that nobody's stepping on anybody else's toes, so that the Microsoft announcements aren't happening at the same time as the Nintendo announcements and are not happening at the same time as the new Shovel Knight announcements. Like, all of that stuff is coordinated through ESA, and then maybe they work with Twitch to get Twitch to stream a certain stream that contains everything. I think that that's really the way that they could go forward and make E3 continue its relevance.
Yeah, I think they said something along the lines of, we're going to try and do a digital type of experience this year. I don't know if that means they're going to try and, corral all the companies together to do that currently, because, Ubisoft, I think, have also said they're going to do a digital thing. I imagine the problem for the ESA is that most of the money they make is off the back of that booth space. They charge ridiculous amounts for these companies to get into those spaces, and obviously, they have the rent on those places as well. So making that money back seems like the difficult thing for them as an organization.
I heard some stat that 50% or something of their entire revenue comes from E3 alone or something. Once you start talking about a digital space, and as you said, if they're making a lot of money through that booth space, you are starting to talk about like the whole existence of the ESA full stop, and like what is their relevance, what is their importance, what are they actually helping video games achieve.
Yeah, totally.
At the same time, while most of their revenue may come from booth space, that's also where most of their expense comes from, is that they have to pay to have that space available. Yeah. So if they are cutting their costs and then they lower the cost of being part of E3, because being part of E3 has got to be really, really good for a lot of people, because it gets the eyeballs of anybody who cares about gaming are all trained on the same place at the same time, and then your game gets mentioned on it, and people are like, hot damn, that new whatever game looks awesome.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and the thing that's interesting is, a lot of people talk about E3 as if E3 is the conferences, and the conferences, I don't know, are technically classified as E3. They happen around E3, like they're adjacent events, but I think E3 as a show is the 3 days on the floor, right? Like, I don't know that, because Microsoft do their own thing in their own theater, or on the Sunday, Bethesda do their own thing. Most
of them happen before.
Yeah, exactly. Before E3 even starts. Nintendo's the only one which, I mean, technically it's right before the show floor opens at the 9 a.m. on the Tuesday. But I think it's cool because we're at this place now where, we started with E3 and Nintendo's pivot to digital events and directs, and people being like, oh no, we're going to lose, the crowd and the audience and stuff like that. And over the years, I think a lot of us have become very tired of that format, especially when you look at Bethesda's conference and, you have the Elder Scrolls woman every time shouting at the crowd, and like the guy can barely get his words out because people are screaming, and, it can become a little bit of a farce to some degree. And so, maybe this switch to digital events, maybe the idea that all the companies are going to do a Nintendo style thing gets them wondering about, like, if the views are the same, if everyone is still showing up to watch and they're still getting the message out there, what's even the point of like going there and paying for that booth space and being on the show floor? Because one of the things I'll probably miss about it is you do get like little tidbits and interviews. So I remember like Game Explain had an interview regarding Paper Mario and the idea that they wanted to keep that series something different because the Mario and Luigi series was an RPG. And if you don't have all the people in that same space doing interviews and talking to each other through the industry, a lot of those like smaller news stories get lost. But again, that's just kind of one of the things that's going to happen if you don't have everyone there at the same time, which is, it's some good, some bad. It's a weird time. How do we feel about Nintendo's E3? Do you think that they're just going to do the same thing they always do and just do the Tuesday 9 a.m. slot?
I'm sure they will. I think that I think what would be awesome is if they also do a treehouse, because that's the thing that they've been doing for the last few years is they do their big spot, and then peppered throughout the rest of E3, they do treehouse, which is where they interview with devs. Now, there are changes that I would like to see made to the treehouse event, and we can get into that if you want later, but I would like them to continue doing treehouse, and then it just doesn't have to be on the show floor. They could just do it wherever they want, you know?
Right, Nintendo's offices, like they've done that before. I can't remember what events it was, but maybe there are a couple of Nintendo Directs where they have been followed by a treehouse stream of them playing the game that was talked about in that Direct, or something along those lines. They can totally do that from their own headquarters, and if it's a smaller group of people, especially if coronavirus is still a thing at that time, you can still get through it, I think, with a small crew of camera people and editors and what have you, live stream producers, plus the talent. The one thing you wouldn't be able to do necessarily is get all the developers from Japan over, because, if they still can't travel, that would be a bit of a bummer. But most of the time, a lot of those segments are just the Treehouse staff talking you through the games and kind of giving demos. So that makes sense. I don't think they would lose Treehouse. I think it's too strong a part of their E3. And the other nice thing is, like, sometimes they pepper in little announcements. Like Sushi Striker was an announcement during Treehouse one year, which wasn't in the main Direct.
What changes did you want to see to Treehouse, Bill?
Well, all right. Some people might not like how I say this, so I'm going to try and be as non-confrontational as possible. But
sure,
it drives me look, it's not like they don't know what they're going to say ahead of time, right?
Yeah.
They show up, they know what they're going to say. Why are they bringing in somebody from Japan who only speaks Japanese, then so that the person can ask the question in English, have it translated to Japanese, the person answers in Japanese, translates it to English. There's a lot of dead air. It's not necessarily dead air, because there are things being said, but if you are just following a script, then just bring in two people that speak English, and then do the same thing in Japanese with two people that speak Japanese, and the same thing in French or whatever, so that it's not like we're just wasting so much time with the translation when they already know everything that they're going to say ahead of time. And that might sound insensitive or xenophobic or something, but it just drives me crazy when they could take 10 minutes to tell us something really, really cool, and it takes 30 minutes because of all of the translations back and forth.
Yeah, and I definitely understand that. When those situations happen on YouTube, I tend to just watch at 1.5 times speed or at 2 times speed, because it kind of jumps through.
You zone out a bit while you're just kind of waiting around.
Yeah. But again, like, it's also, I think the dead air kind of helps the presenters, maybe in terms of making sure they are getting their footing and they can take their time with the game a little bit, and maybe if someone is playing the game as well as asking questions, it allows them a bit of a free moment to focus on the playing of the game as well. So I guess there are reasons for it too.
That's true. If you just get rid of the whole live aspect of it and pre-record stuff, then I think it's better. Nintendo has always been very bad at the live stuff. They are much better at pre-recorded stuff, in my opinion. If you look at the announcement for the Nintendo Switch, when we had that dude walking his dog and playing Zelda, and Karen running across to rooftops and playing Mario.
It's great.
Like, that was awesome. And then we had the next thing where Koizumi goes out on stage and talks about stuff, and that was all very stilted, and the translators couldn't understand what
oh man, when Suda51 came out on stage, and the poor translator had to know, because he just went completely off script and he just did what he said, whatever he wanted, and it was just a nightmare.
Nintendo's just bad at live stuff. Just do pre-recorded. You're really good at that, Nintendo.
Yeah, that's true. And obviously I'm have no doubt that it will just be a direct again, and we'll kind of just lay out the land for what's going to be happening. I mean, it's interesting because we're at this point now where we are waiting for a direct of some kind, and I mean, we're only a few months, like 3 months away from E3, and I don't know what they're going to announce before then or then, and after Animal Crossing there's nothing on the slate, so it's a bit of a weird time.
I feel like I was a young man during the last direct. Yeah. It's been definitely a while, so
I will push through. There's rumors. I think it was VentureBeat suggesting that there's going to be an indie direct next week, which would make sense because they always do one around the time of GDC. And even though GDC is cancelled, I'm sure that they will have indie games to talk about.
It's interesting that there might be an indie direct on top of like a standard direct. And as you say, if it is only 3 months, are we talking about purely games come out in the next 3 months? I guess like they've definitely...
I don't think so.
I mean, yeah, but they've had directs where they do often talk about very few games, and sometimes there's maybe one new announcement. So, like, I personally will keep my expectations very low on the pre-E3 direct, and then probably expect more from the E3 one, obviously.
Sure. Cool. Well, we'll see what happens. E3 is coming. You can't stop it in terms of, these companies still getting their announcements out there. And Microsoft's an interesting one as well, because I wonder, do they even, like, no one can have live events now. Like, Sony and Microsoft both did PS4 and Xbox One live shows where people came out and sat in audiences, and I think all of that's going to have to change in the next few months, because that's kind of going to be the time where they're both announcing stuff. So
could we be in the same boat as the journalists when the details on these systems are revealed? We're just watching a stream along with them.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I think everyone will be in the same boat, which is interesting. Cool. Well, let's get on to some video games then. Video games we've been playing, and let's just start with a big one, because obviously Ori and the Blind Forest, one of my favorite games of all time. It came out on Switch last year. Bally just recently played it. I think, was it last show you talked about it, and then you were like, I bought an Xbox as well.
Was that last show? Yeah.
I think it was.
Yeah.
So now Bally has an Xbox to play the sequel, Ori and the Will of the Wisps, and I know, Bill, you've played some of it as well. Do you guys want to give your first impressions of it, how you feel about it? Maybe, Bill, we'll start with you, because you played just a little bit of it so far.
All right, so I'll say that I've played about an hour so far, and I'm not spoiling anything by saying what a roller coaster of emotions the intro to this game is. First off, it's gorgeous, but the interactions between the characters and the way that they're telling a story without, well, I don't want to say without any words, but with very few words, and the words that they do show don't really help tell the story at all. But the way that they're telling the story is incredibly interesting, and I have to say that I felt like, do you know at the beginning of the movie Up?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's how it made me feel. Yeah, and I was just like, it's so amazing. They've really got something special here.
Did you play the first game? Because I think that game definitely has a similar vibe in terms of the intro. Probably an even more of a sad kind of intro, melancholic for the first game.
I played the first one. One of my viewers sent it to me as a gift. I played it, and I did not finish it because anybody who listens to my content knows I don't finish games. I get too distracted by the next shiny thing.
Sure, yeah.
But I really enjoyed what I played with it, and great controls, amazing graphics, everything about Ori is fantastic, and Will of the Wisps takes it, and from what I've played so far, steps everything up a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely. And like visually, you would be mistaken to think like, oh, it kind of looks similar to the old game, but if you go back and compare them, it is just such a remarkable step up, just in terms of, and it's not just the art, it's the way it interacts with the environment. Like when Ori moves on different surfaces, like the way that they give, or like the soft ground like kind of melts a little bit under his feet, and some of the sound design that goes along with it, just the movement of the environment, the way the objects kind of rustle. It's like similar Hollow Knight thing in terms of, you hit bushes or you go past leaves and they'll sway in the wind as well. Everything feels like it has a real tangibility and kind of life to it, which is pretty amazing. Bally, how have your kind of first, I guess, 6-7 hours you've played of it gone so far?
Yeah, maybe a little more than 7 hours. According to my Xbox, I've played about 60 hours, which is very strange because it just kind of like, it registered the hours. It was in sleep mode for some reason or turned off, but oh well. So I have no idea strictly how much I've played, but I reckon I'm closing in on two-thirds of the game roughly. I'm having an absolute blast. Like, it is everything that the first game had, and all the very minor flaws when you step back and think about the first game. It kind of like maybe like the combat, or to focus on platforming, but this game focuses on platforming, takes the platforming to another level through abilities and other things, which is awesome, and then also ramps up with the combat. There are added characters in this game. There's areas that are like towns and things that like kind of just give the world this life, and all those areas where people were saying, whoa, Hollow Knight is like this, it's incredible and does this thing, and this game, and then I know you were saying, MBZ, like the developer said like this wasn't directly inspired by Hollow Knight, and everyone is obviously making the Hollow Knight comparison, but it's very hard to ignore like what they've done between the first game and the second game is done completely independently of a game like Hollow Knight, like, because it really does open up that scope. It's got a real feel of Breath of the Wild in many ways, where it is very non-linear in parts, and the way that the story ramps up, and
it's kind of like you get to the end of Act 1 and then they're like, okay, there are these 4 places you can go, choose where you go, like they're all open to you.
Exactly.
And the thing I find really interesting about it is, you know, obviously I'm going to play through this game again like multiple times, but with the first game it is a more linear metroidvania in the style of a fusion, and you kind of have to get your abilities, then go to the next area. With this, it's interesting because there's a lot of different choices you're making, not only in terms of where you're going next, but in terms of what weapons are you using, right? Like, you are using the hammer a lot. I did a bunch of the kind of sword lightsaber thing, but I also use... there's another ability that's kind of like an explodey thing, and there's one that is a lance that homes into enemies and kind of... you can just do it from a ranged perspective, or the bow and arrow, which then, the shard system comes into it where you can split the arrow into 3 different things. So there are so many possibilities for how you want to play the game, and it seems to kind of support any of them, really.
And you can play, or you get to decide which abilities you're going to use, because you can only use 3 at a time, right?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so you can only use 3 at a time, but you get a whole list of different abilities, and you can say, all right, in this section, I'm going to use these 3 things, but maybe in the next section, I'm going to switch to these 3 things.
Yeah, and definitely between platforming and combat, my loadout would switch dramatically, because there's definitely things that, for me, I always had to keep handy if I was going to be moving around, versus if I'm fighting stuff. If I'm fighting stuff, I have the healing thing equipped all the time, whereas if I'm not, sometimes I'll switch it out. And I think one of the tricky things about it is because my brain is so wired to the original game, abilities like Bash, which you get quite early on, are hardwired for me to press the Y button to bash on an enemy or on a projectile. But that's changed now because they put that on a shoulder button, and they put the dash on a shoulder button.
It kind of makes sense because you are at points using all 4 different shoulder buttons while you're platforming, and you're essentially using all 4 of them to keep Ori essentially flying, almost like Spider-Man. It really genuinely feels like that in 2D, and you're just kind of juggling these 4 different moves, traversing the world, and it just... Yes, Bash is probably still my favorite, and is the best way to define Ori and that first game. But
it's just the most flexible one.
It's the most flexible, and it's the coolest in the sense that you can like deflect stuff back at enemies. Like, that is just awesome in any game. But when you add on those extra layers, it is really kind of pat your head, rub your stomach kind of stuff at points when you are just soaring through the sky, and it kind of really works incredibly well.
Yeah, the sense of momentum is just remarkable in terms of, there's they showed it in the trailer, but there's like a whip ability, like a grapple hook essentially. And that one, I kind of wish it had a little bit more momentum to it. It kind of depends on where you are versus the object that you're grappling to. But it kind of, like, the distance to which you can attach to it is so large that it feels like the developers just give you such a great window of opportunity to just stay in the air all the time. And as you said, like, even with the combat stuff, I saw a thing on Reset Era, there was a GIF someone shared of getting up to this wall early by jumping in the air, using the hammer, and then using the sword back to back to give them height from using the weapons, and then doing the double jump after that to hang onto a wall that without that extra boost they wouldn't have been able to get to. So kind of like speed run type stuff being built in here as well. So for me, I obviously just devoured this game, within the space of 3 days, and 100%ed it, got every single thing, upgraded all the shards, got every weapon, filled out the village, did literally everything. I could not put it down. And I think one of the things, I don't know if you guys have come across any of them, obviously people have been chatting about the technical stuff and some frame rate issues. What have you been playing it on, Bill? On PC or on Xbox?
On PC, because I have the Xbox Game Pass thing, and so
yes.
It was free, and I don't have an Xbox.
Okay, cool. So you then, did you experience any audio issues at all on that Windows version?
Not that I noticed, but
Okay.
what do you mean by audio issues?
So basically, I had this problem throughout the game where during cutscenes, or when you would start up dialogue, or sometimes when shifting to areas when the music would change, where my system would just go like zzz, 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 and like kind of like the game wouldn't stop, but the audio would like crackle up and do this kind of buzzing sound that felt like my PC was dying almost, but it wasn't to do with my PC, it was to do with the game itself. And this is a widely reported problem for a lot of people on PC, because otherwise I had no issues. Like, it was a very smooth frame rate the entire time, looked amazing, like didn't have any hitches in terms of the visuals, but the audio, for whatever reason, and it was a bit of a bummer because that opening cutscene is amazing and majestic, and like every now and then it would just be like zzz, zzz, and kind of like butt in to ruin it almost, which was a bit of a shame.
Well, I'll be honest, when I started up and I had my headphones on and I was all ready to play, and I was going to record some footage of me playing, and my wife came in and my son came in, and they sat down, and so we were just kind of chatting while I was doing that first hour of gameplay. So I wasn't paying attention to the sound too much.
Okay.
So maybe I just missed that stuff. But that being said, that sound makes it, the way that you're describing it, it sounds almost like a RAM issue. Like,
yeah, or like streaming. I think it was based on if you different hard drives you were using. So when people installed it on their SSDs, they had a better time with it in terms of like streaming the data. So that might be the issue. But they did patch it. They put out an 8 gigabyte patch, which didn't work for, like, messed up my downloads. I spent an entire morning just like trying to fix it, and it was not working. So I think the Game Pass on Windows 10 has some issues, certainly. I had some issues with Halo, and Final Fantasy 15 won't play, but aside from that, like, I guess, I can't really complain because I'm paying £4 a month for access to all these games. So, and it is still in beta on PC, so that definitely mitigates some of the problems people might have with it. But like, the first game is one of my favorite games of all time. Just the movement, the flow, all of it, the remarkable escape sequences, all that stuff. And I think this game, had this been the first one, would have impacted a bit more, because I think it definitely has the Galaxy 2 syndrome of, wow, Galaxy 2 is way better than Galaxy 1 in terms of level design and platforming and visuals, all this stuff, but I don't know it has the same impact as the first game. I feel similarly with this game, where, like, this is remarkable. This is like the most polished, perfect version of this idea possible, and it is like my favorite thing ever, but it doesn't quite have the same initial impact as the first one does.
Yeah.
And that's hard, right? Because you can't, like, when it's something brand new, it's always gonna be shiny, and you're always going to pay more attention to it.
Playing them really close together, it is, for me, those added, like, there's some very large creatures, let's just say, that you interact with, both friend and foe in this game, and they add a real sense of perspective to the world. Like, the first game is an incredibly lonely place. It's very Metroid in a very traditional sense, where you are like Samus going around a very empty world fighting a lot of enemies, and yes, there's a handful of characters, but hardly any, and there's hardly any bosses in the first game really at all, whereas this game,
I mean, the escape sequences are the bosses.
The escape sequences are the bosses, but an escape sequence isn't a character that kind of, affects the story in the same way. Whereas this game has the escape sequences on top of these bosses and these huge...
And in some cases, they combine the two together, right? Where you are fighting a boss while doing... Like, the first phase will be fighting, then you'll do an escape sequence, then you'll fight it again, do a bit more escape sequence, and kind of threading the needle between both of them, which is very cool.
The music is incredible, like, during those points. Like, there's just this level of polish, and it's just so well done. I wanted to pick up on what you you said earlier, Bill, about it being a bit like Up, that opening, and I was going to just say
it's very Pixar-esque, isn't it? Yeah,
it's very Disney generally, and it feels like, I know Disney have a very strange history of video games and looking backwards, but this feels like if Disney wanted to come up with a brand new character that they were only doing for video games, Ori and the Blind Forest or Ori and Will of the Wisps is kind of like what I would imagine they would go for, something in that realm of thinking. Because yes, Ori, I think Ori himself looks just like Stitch from Lilo and Stitch.
Yeah, there's a resemblance.
Got that very strange. Anyway, like a little alien.
I was waiting for a lawsuit.
Right.
Yeah.
And I must say, like, if you look at the way the colors pop in an area like the water area,
Luma Pools is ridiculous. It is the most bright,
so
like
cool.
Pink and blues, and just amazing, just visual splendor.
I will hands down say it's like my favorite water-related level or sequence or area of like any game. Full stop.
Right.
Both like mechanically, visually, musically. It's got a great boss fight. Like everything worked about that area, and it is that just. It does feel like this just Disney in a video game in a way, but like obviously very much Microsoft's own thing. Like it's just, this game has this, it makes you want to be in that world. As impressive as a world like Hollow Knight was, it was not a world I ever wanted to be in. It was just gothic and scary and creepy. And yes, there are creepy aspects in this world, and I think they're done really well.
Oh boy, like that dark area, one of the incredible, like the animation in this game is remarkable in terms of Ori and his tool set. Like you dash to a pole, and the way he like whips around the pole, you climb to the top, and he does the Mario 64 like hang off the top of the pole. Just all the little tiny details of that.
He does a Mario 64 jump when you duck, apparently, as well.
Yeah, exactly. Does that as well. And if you go to that dark area, like the skittering bugs on the wall, the way their wings are like flapping, like I felt this real sense of like disgust at it, and just like that I was actually within that place, because the sound design alongside the animation of the like small bits of light you see of them just like skittering and like they're kind of stuck to walls and stuff like that. It's disgusting, but like incredible.
That's something that really only hit me after that first act. As impressive as the game is up until then, the environments you're in are broadly similar in terms of a bit more swampy, I'd argue. The first game's very foresty, obviously, but like there's similar greens, similar tone to the world, and it is, once the game starts branching out, you're like, whoa, there's a crazy diversity to what this world is showing.
Absolutely, yeah. And so just movement is the name of the game with Ori, and it has always been my favorite thing about it, and why I distinguish it like from other Metroidvania style games. I know a lot of people are more of the Hollow Knight camp, and that's fine. I think Hollow Knight is a fantastic game, like really well made, but it's a game that focuses far more on combat and exploration than it does on mobility, whereas Ori is all about just moving and the feel good of movement. And I like what you brought up about the water segment, because I never really thought about it. Like everyone says, is there a good water level in existence? And everyone's like, no, it doesn't exist. Controlling things underwater is always bad. Controlling Ori underwater has always been good and always feels great. And I never really thought about that, but you're right. Like it's just, there's a fluidity, and once you get that ability in that area as well, it makes it even more smooth to traverse. So yeah, that definitely is an important kind of step to build it up. But like in terms of these other aspects, in terms of the customizability and adding shards and doing the combat shrines, there are time trials. That's one of my favorite additions, actually, is the time trials, because, you know, the game itself, I feel it's hard for me to tell because I have played Ori so much, the first game, but this feels to me a much easier game in terms of its difficulty level. I died maximum of one time on every boss or escape sequence. I did most of them either second or first time. And a lot of the bosses I felt like I was well equipped for. Maybe it was just because I was exploring so much, so I had so much health, so much energy, that it was not really a worry for me. But it definitely feels like a much easier game on the normal difficulty. And I know, Bill, you're quite early on. How have you found the difficulty of it? Is it the kind of thing you usually go in for in terms of the tough platforming and stuff like that?
I fought one boss, that very first boss that you fight, and I I was worried I wasn't going to be able to beat him because his health bar was not going down as fast as I felt like it should, and he's huge and takes up a lot of the screen, and I didn't feel like I had a lot of room, but I didn't die. So I think maybe you're right. It is a little bit easier. I don't remember the first one too terribly well because it's been so long since I've played it, and I almost never go back and replay games that I've played. So,
yeah, I mean, that's the similest thing here. We talked about that, I think, last show in terms of when you do a podcast like this and you're always on to the next thing, it's very hard to carve out the time to just go back to things you've already played.
Yeah, try doing 5 shows a week.
Yeah, I know, yeah. So yeah, for me, I think overall the difficulty is... It's not a bad thing. I think it's because they do have the hard option. So I want to go through and play it on hard now and see how I find that.
I do hear a lot of people saying that they were turned off by the first game because of the difficulty. And
yeah, but also the thing that really gets me with people is like, oh, I really didn't like the save system in the first game because, you'd go 10 minutes. And I was like, I'm just a very different personality, but I'm a serial saver. I will save all the time, and if I don't save, then I know there's a problem. So the first game was actually really good for me because I knew exactly where I was saving and what was going on. There have been a couple of times in this game where I have not hit a checkpoint and I've been like, oh, I have to go back and get that thing. I didn't think I should have wanted to save almost on my own before that happening.
Yeah,
but
there's a number of dead ends where you have to go and get the thing and come back to almost like the safe point in order to for the checkpoint to.
And sometimes you have to run back and forth a little bit to trigger the save.
Yeah.
You see it in the bottom corner. But
I didn't run into that at all. I felt like anytime I died, which I did die multiple times because I would do something stupid. Like I'd run into a spot where there were a bunch of spikes and it would, but as I was playing, like if I died, I would respawn very, very close to where I had died. So I felt like the checkpoints were very close together.
Yeah, and this is like the rare occasion, I'm saying. Like, it certainly wasn't the case for most of the game.
It's especially on the dead ends when there's like an item or a collectible,
or especially if you're underwater, right? Because there's no saving when you're underwater.
Yes.
Oh, actually, there is, weirdly enough. There was one part where I respawned and I was underwater again. I was like, oh, wow, weird. Okay, sure. So there is, a little bit of that going on, but... I think that it was mitigated for me because one of the bonuses of the save system in the first game was you could get an ability on the skill tree that healed you whenever you saved, which was always the way of me being like, oh, I need to bump my health up a little bit, I need to do a save point. It wasn't necessarily to make the save, it was more to heal myself. But now you have the dedicated heal, which kind of mitigates that. Like, it makes it not as much of an issue. So there was always enough energy for me to be like, okay, I'm healing myself, I'm fine. And I think the game is quite generous in terms of the energy it gives you from enemies or health it gives you from enemies. And there's also shards that you can slot in, which are the one that I did straight away and upgraded as much as possible was getting the bonus spirit light from killing enemies, because it just means you get more spirit, which means you get the abilities unlocked faster.
Which fuels everything, right?
Yeah, fuels the entire system, and makes it work. And how have you felt so far about the combat, Bally? Because for me, I was worried initially that it would be too much of a focus because I like the platforming in this game, the first game especially. Like, that was the core of why it was so good, and I didn't want them to move away from it too much. I found that there isn't too much of it. Like, it feels well spread out. It feels like if you want to do the combat shrines, you can do those, and they're not too challenging. Like, they have a good kind of balance to them. There was one area very early in the game that I went to that I definitely was not supposed to go to. There was a bunch of enemies that I didn't end up fighting properly until like 3-4 hours, maybe 6 hours into the game later, that I came across other versions of those enemies. But I did that combat area, finished it after like 10 or 12 tries, and that was probably the hardest thing I did in the game because it was very early. I had like no health, no energy, and so I was able to kind of unlock this early shard that I didn't end up using because it was one of those stupid ones like, you take a bunch of damage, but also you put out, I don't know. It wasn't a great one that I was interested in using.
Yeah, I've really enjoyed the combat. I was curious what it would feel like, and honestly, it feels incredible. Like, I think I've been much better this game, and I'm better generally in Ori to find. I'm normally very bad in Metroidvanias at getting like added health packs, and as a result, I can find what would otherwise be quite easy bosses or enemies are really difficult because I'm like dying a lot because I've got a low health.
Well, that's another change to this game, is that they now have done a bit of a Zelda thing where you get 2 shards or 2 fragments to get a full one instead of just getting a full one.
Yeah, I was like, oh, geez, this is going to be brutal, but it's actually been fine.
Right, well, I think it's more because the world is so much larger that
yeah.
they have to spread out the abilities a bit more, which makes sense.
No,
Like, have more
exactly.
things to collect, essentially.
And I've found all the what do you call it? The fight rooms like they're absolutely fine so far.
Yeah, combat shrines.
Combat shrine.
None
I've
of them
done
are too tricky.
4 of them, and I think 5 or 6 that are in the game, right? So
Yeah, there are 5 because I believe each one you beat, you get an extra slot on
Yeah,
your shard, so
yeah.
you can put more abilities in. Yeah.
I think the reward is more like better and more worthwhile than the actual enjoyment of the fights itself. Like it is quite.
There's definitely some interesting enemy combinations in there. I like mixing it up in terms of using bash to get
Yeah.
projectiles from like the plant guys. They shoot a really annoying
and
one.
they set them up like that, which is nice. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I've found the combat generally pretty straightforward. The same with the boss fights. I've been like charging up my bow and going for that strategy on boss fights, and it seems to work really well. And like as you said, like you do get more light during boss fights, which does just make it all a bit more seamless and a bit easier. And it is just generally much easier for me than the first game. I think the combat is tough at points, but as long as you're collecting and you are going through the systems, you'll be absolutely fine. And I have been so far, which has been great.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say enough good things about it. It is just on every level, like aside from the technical issues which have been happening. I know you had a little bit of frame rate issues on Xbox.
Yeah, a bit of frame rate, a bit of my game not loading, my Xbox like hard crashing like 3 times and then working the 4th time.
I wish they had like an extra couple of weeks just iron these issues out.
Yeah,
because...
and like warping between places has crashed it once, I think. But
okay.
Otherwise, it's okay. It's I don't know. It is a very. We were talking about this game potentially coming to Switch, and I think that's starting to look harder.
Yeah, I am. If it's struggling on struggling on an Xbox One X in some senses, then like, oh boy, they're gonna have to really do something about it on Switch for it to even. Because I think so much of what they've changed is there are so many more 3D models in the terms of the bosses are huge. Like you can tell,
like in the background, and then they become the foreground, and vice versa. And like it's a big step up.
It's pushing polygons, it really is, and yeah, you'd be mistaken for thinking, oh, it just looks the same as the first game. Compare them side by side, it is a remarkable step up, and yeah.
Not just that, but if you look at the screenshots, do not do this game justice, because if you look at it, you're like, okay, it looks very, very nice, but when you see it in motion, you're like, oh my god, everything in the world is moving, everything.
Yeah,
that is a lot of computation that has to be happening someplace, and I don't think the Switch can handle this. Of course, we didn't think that the Switch would be able to run The Witcher 3, and while The Witcher 3 looks kind of like hot trash on the Switch,
yeah,
it's pretty impressive that they were able to pull that off. So
yeah,
maybe.
like I'm not going to put it past them. That's the whole idea of, like, if someone pitched me that when the Switch was first announced, I'd be like, no, get out. There's no way in hell. But they did do it, and they've put up fixes recently as well, I think, and patched it a bit to make it a bit better. So yeah, but like I cannot say enough good things about Ori and the Will of the Wisp. It is undoubtedly like one of the best sequels ever made. It is really like that Mario Galaxy to Galaxy 2 level of a jump, even more so in many senses.
It's a proper sequel. It's not just more of the same, which can happen.
This is basically my perfect video game. Like the movement, the feel of it, the exploration, the visuals, the sound, like even the storytelling, which is light, and like there's a really sad moment in the middle of the game, and there's a mechanical change that happens that is amazing, and you think, oh shit, is the whole game gonna change for this reason? And then something else happens, and it kind of leads you to your quest, the main quest of finding all the wisps. That entire sequence is just so top notch on every single level, just artistry and technical, just perfection. And it blew me away, and like that was the moment where I was like, okay, this is really something special, and it just continues to get better. It's a game that only gets better the more you play it, and the more you explore, the more you find. I just devoured it, and afterwards, like I haven't felt this way since playing a game in a long time, in terms of just not knowing what to do with myself. Like I enormously loved it, and I'm hoping that they put out patches soon, because I just want to play it again without any of those annoying audio things ruining kind of the cutscenes and some of the escape sequences, and try it on hard and do it in a different order. That, like, one of the fun things is there are certain abilities that I got quite early that Bally doesn't even have yet, and so you've done areas which I got around probably a lot easier because I had a certain ability that you don't. And so just that approach to the non-linear game design and the idea of like going any direction you want is really cool. So yeah, any last thoughts on Ori before we move on?
I love it. It's going to take some beating for the rest of the year.
Yes, absolutely. I know there's lots of games coming, but oh boy, it's a very special
It's amazing.
Thing. Cool. Well, Bill, let's move on to some things you've been playing. Lots of interesting little things. What do you want to start with?
I want to start with Ibb and Obb, which is a game that I think that the two of you need to play together. It's a multiplayer game. It's on the Nintendo Switch. It's also on Steam. I don't know if they have cross-play or anything, but you play each. It's a multiplayer-focused game, and you have a little red dude and a little green dude. And the world is basically split into two halves, where one half is above the line and the other half is below the line. If you're above the line, then gravity is normal. If you're below the line, then gravity is reversed. So
okay. So it's kind of like VVV in a sense.
Yeah, in a sense. So if you're below the line, then you walk on the line, but if you were to look up, you would be facing down, if that makes sense. And if you're above the line,
you're walking on the ceiling versus walking on the floor.
Right. The line is essentially where gravity goes to, no matter which side you're on. And you have these gates that you can go through. And the gates, if it is white, then the green guy can go through it and the red guy can go through it. If the gate is green, only the green guy can go through it. And if the gate is red, then only the red guy can go through it. And you have to go through and solve puzzles as a team as you go through the area. Like you'll say, okay, I need to jump up to this next level, so come over here and I'll stand on you, then you jump, and then I'll jump off you to land on this level, and then you can go the other way around because you can get through one half that I can't go through. And then there are these monsters that are black and spiky, but they have a mirror on the other side that is white and puffy. And if you hit those white puffy things, the black and spiky guys disappear, and then you get like coins or crystals or something like that. It's like, really... Go ahead.
This reminded me of like Cookies and Cream. Like that was like a weird co-op game back in the day where like one person's on one side, one person's on the other side, and you're basically helping each other get through obstacles, as it were.
Yes, except that you constantly are switching sides, and there's also a physics to it that is very Portal-esque in the way where you can get momentum by like getting up really high and then going through a gate, and then you'll get flung really, really low, and so you have to use that momentum and gravity to get to different places. It's really interesting and very fun.
So if there's like a really high up platform on the bottom layer, you have to like momentum your way so you can actually reach it from the top.
Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. And is this Joy-Cons only? Do they let you use Pro controllers when you're doing multiplayer, or how does it work?
I'm 90% sure that I used my SN30 Pro Plus, which is the 8-bit controller.
Is that the like Super Nintendo style controller?
Yeah, but it has the handles, the extended handles.
Oh, okay.
So I think that I used that, and I played it online with a friend. So we got on Discord and we were playing online and we were talking to each other.
That was what I was going to ask, which is like, yeah, me and Bally could play it, but we would have to be in person to do it because most of these games don't have an online option for co-op stuff like that. So that's great to hear that it does that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it has online, and it is really, really fun. And I think a lot of your listeners would love to see you guys play through this game together.
Yeah, do a Twitch stream and get through it co-op. That would be a fun thing to do.
Yeah, it's a fantastic game.
Awesome. And like, is it that long? Like, is it kind of a short game?
I don't know. I don't finish games. I'm
Oh,
early
true.
on.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. No, I looked up some footage of it. It looks pretty neat, and I like that kind of asymmetrical game design, right? Where one player is doing one thing and the other is doing another, and you kind of have to cooperate in order to get through.
It's 6 hours according to how long to beat.
Okay, all right, that's reasonable.
Now, they changed Nintendo's website. It used to be that I could go there and see how much it costs, even though I bought the thing. But now it just says downloaded. So I don't know how much it costs because I got it as a review copy.
That's maybe one of my most frustrating things about the eShop, that I never voice, but every time I see it, I'm like, oh, why? It's like you go and it says purchased. I'm like, yes, I know, but like how?
Controlling of Nintendo. It's just so weird.
Yeah.
All right, I looked it up. I loaded in a guest window in Chrome. It's $15.
Okay, cool. Okay. So probably around 12, probably 13 here, knowing the price hiking that happens in the UK versus over there. But hey, cool. I'll keep an eye out on it. Might be a sale game that we can both pick up. That sounds cool. Great. What else you been playing?
So Doom was, I've been very excited for Doom Eternal coming. I'm picking that up on Stadia. I'm very excited for that game.
Oh, on Stadia, very good.
And I ended up picking up Doom, like the original Doom, on Switch because it was on sale for like $1.50. It was like a stupid low price.
Yeah, I told Bally about that sale. I was like, this is like no money. You should just get this for reasons, because it's it's a classic. I feel like everyone should probably play that game at some point. I have had it sitting on my Switch since it launched because I had like leftover currency from my American eShop account, so I just got it on there.
Which systems did it originally come out on?
PC.
Just
the original
PC.
Doom game. But Doom has been on literally everything imaginable. You can drive a fucking car that has Doom in it. Like, you see those videos online of people who have programmed their like computers in their cars to where you turn the steering wheel and it turns, and like you press the horn and it shoots and stuff like that. It's ridiculous.
I'm sure that you can find it on refrigerators or toasters as well. Anything with a screen,
100%.
Somebody has found a way to play Doom on it.
Yeah, 100%.
But I've been playing that, and I know that it had a really, really rocky start. But I'm having a blast with it, and I gotta say, most first-person shooters I will not play on the Switch because the Joy-Cons don't lend themselves. They have such a short throw, and it just the button layout doesn't feel right to me. So if I'm gonna play a first-person shooter, I'll usually play it on some other platform, or I will use a Pro controller when playing on the Switch. That's not nearly as important because there's no vertical aiming in Doom, because that was made back in the day. Like when I played Doom on the original on PC, you did not use a mouse. You put your right hand on the arrow keys and your left hand was on the control button, and that's how you played first-person shooters when I was a kid. Which is weird because I remember when Quake first came out and they wanted me to use WASD and a mouse, and I said, well, I'm returning this. That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard.
It's so funny.
Yeah, but Doom doesn't have any vertical aiming, so it's just left and right, and if somebody's up higher, then it automatically just shoots up higher. They've done patches to fix the lighting, fix the sound, fix the frame rate. Bethesda could have just shipped this and left it the way it was. But they decided to fix it, and I've been having a lot of fun with it. It's cool, and if you have any nostalgia for Doom, I don't think it's on sale anymore. It was already pretty cheap, I believe.
It's really cheap. I think all three of the games are on there, or Doom 1, 2, and 3, and 64 will be coming out whenever Doom Eternal comes to Switch, I believe. So there's going to be a lot of Doom on the system for people, so it's easy to access, and it's one that I have just sitting there, and I'm like, one day I'm going to play that. I need to get to it, because it is like I kind of have this feeling of I should play these classic games just from a historical curiosity perspective, right? Like, I tried playing the first Half-Life. I played it for like 2 hours, and I was like, I'm getting motion sick from this. I totally get why this is important. Not for me. I can't play this right now, but I think Doom is probably going to be a much easier proposition for me in terms of motion sickness and stuff, because it's kind of spoofs it almost. It's like a 2D game that forces a 3D perspective almost through trickery, right? Like, I mean, I guess there are 3D elements to it, but like your gun is a sprite, the enemies are sprites, so and it uses distancing and stuff to scale them up and down essentially, which is pretty cool.
But it's definitely a game that changed the industry, and I think everybody should probably play it at some point. And it's $5. I got it when it was $1.50, but it's $5 on Nintendo Switch. It's fun.
Cool. Sounds good. And then you've been playing a lot of Apex Legends as well, a game close to both Bally and my hearts.
You know what? I've got, with Doom Eternal coming out and Animal Crossing coming out, both coming out on Friday, I've been running into this issue where very little can hold my attention because they're not those two games.
Yeah, I feel you. Right before Ori, I was like bouncing between things and being like, I don't want to play anything. I just want to play this new thing that's not here yet.
You don't want to start something big when something big is about to come, you know?
Yeah.
Exactly. And Apex does not require any real thought on my part. I can jump in and play a quick match and get killed in 10 minutes and then be done with it. So I've been playing a lot of Apex because it has that quick, okay, I played a match. Now I can just one more match, and I can just keep doing those one more matches.
I was going to say, the idea that you put it down after one match sounds very impressive because I've never done that in my life.
Yeah. Bally tells himself he's going to do that, and then he spends like 6 hours on a Saturday and just like non-stop.
Yeah, I've played long periods of that game at points.
Right, and it's distracting me from other games that I should be playing because I need to, be able to talk about them on the show. And I look at those and I'm like, well, that's really more of something that's going to take a little more time from me. So I'll just play Apex because that has this quick, it's over fast, and it feels like there's no commitment. And right now I am feeling very no commitment because Animal Crossing and Doom Eternal are coming, and those are the games that I really want to play.
Totally, yeah. Did you use the Battle Pass at all? Do you do a lot of the different modes they add to Apex as it's been going along? Because I've jumped in here and there. They did the Halloween one where you came back as a zombie. They did duos, which Bally and I played for a bit. How much are you keeping up with it on a regular basis?
I don't really pay it. This drives my son crazy because he'll come up and I'll be playing and he'll be like, "Oh, which skin is that?" And I'll be like, "I don't know. I just picked one that I thought looked cool." And he can't understand that I don't care what my character looks like. So I just I kind of pick stuff and don't pay attention to that stuff. I do like the limited time modes that they add.
Yeah, they're cool.
But I wish that they would give us the option to play them whenever we want. Like right now they have a mode called Deja Loot where every time you play, all of the loot is in the same location and the drop ship comes from the same angle. And so that one I like less, except that I can play on the old map. Like you get to play on the original map when you do the Deja Loot. And for me, I like the original map a lot. But I don't like Deja Loot because I don't remember where anything is because I have a goldfish memory.
Yeah, and all the pro people are going to go to the places where they know all the good stuff is, and they're going to get it before you. And it feels to me like more of a mode that is built for competitive play. Like if they were to do a tournament for Apex Legends, that would be a good setup for it because it would allow people to actually there's no randomization, right? With where things are, people just know where they are.
Yeah, it feels more fair.
Yeah, totally.
I've said to my son many times because he'll be playing Fortnite or Apex or Warzone or whatever battle royale because that's his genre that he likes.
Sure, yeah.
He'll be playing whatever and he'll say, "Oh man, well this." He'll be talking about that he just got 15 kills or something and he's the nobody's as good as him, and I'll be like, "Well, just remember, buddy, that." A lot of these games are luck, or he'll get killed instantaneously and he'll be like, well, how come I got killed so fast? That's not fair. And I'll be like, well, because a lot of these games are luck. Did you land in the right spot and find the right thing? Did you have the weapon that you really, really are good with, or did you end up with some stupid pistol that you hate using? And did you have more than 15 seconds to get some stuff together before you ran into another player? All of these things, there is a lot of randomness in the Battle Royale genre, and the Deja Loot thing kind of takes all of that randomness away, and I almost think that would be the better way to do their tournaments and stuff like that for these kinds of games.
Yeah, totally. I think it makes a lot more sense. I mean, there's definitely a degree to which, even if I get lucky and I get purple shields and I have the best gun, there's a limit to my own skill. So even if I'm up against someone who has no shields and whatever, if they're better than me, they'll still probably kill me before I can do anything. Yes. So that definitely has to be mentioned. But yeah, for me, Apex and Overwatch are my two games that I'm always jumping back into now and again. And yeah, they're good things to go back to. They're just so easy to jump in and just do a round and be done. It's good times with that stuff. Great. Well, the last thing we're going to talk about is WarioWare Gold, which I have been playing a bunch of it this morning. I basically went through the entire thing this morning, essentially. It's very short in terms of the main kind of story, I guess you want to call it, which actually... there is a story here, and the most surprising thing about WarioWare Gold, which is essentially it's like a best-of collection for the WarioWare series on 3DS. They've got stuff from Touched, they've got stuff from Twisted, from the original, even some of the stuff from the Wii game, like there's the Wind Waker minigame where you had to hold the Wii remote over your head to land on the platform. That's a motion-controlled twist game in this, but it's basically like all the old games and some new ones thrown in there randomly as well. But it's packaged in a way that is very much higher production than you would imagine. Like, this game is reminding me a lot of Sushi Striker. I don't know if you ever played Sushi Striker Build. Was that a game you came across?
I mean, I played the demo, but it didn't super grab me, so I was like, I don't have time for this.
Yeah, it's a weird game. But I think one of the interesting things about Sushi Striker is how much there is in terms of voice acting and cutscenes and dialogue, and just like really weird stuff. Like, it's a humorous game, but just super Japanese and strange. And WarioWare has always been a weird game, right? Like, just generally as a concept, it's very out there. But this game has so much dialogue and cutscenes and voiceover. Like, all the characters, like Mona and Ashley and Spitz and Dribble and 9volt. Cat and Anna, yeah, they're all in there. There are a couple of new characters. There's Penny. Penny is Dr. Krygor's granddaughter. And there's another guy who's like a ninja whose name I can't remember. But all of these games are split up into categories. So you've got the MASH League, the Touch League, and the Twist League. And so like, all the games in this are going to be motion ones. All the games in this are going to be touchscreen ones, which is a nice split way to do it. But every time you do one, you get a little bit of cutscene beforehand. So the Mona one, she goes to this shop and she's looking for a dress, and she's like, "Oh, I want a dress that's like parfait and it's plushy, but also cool like Wario." And the shop owner is a dog, and he's dressed in a suit, and like he's trying to Mona's almost hitting on him almost. It's really weird. And then the mini games take place as she is like inside a dresser. He's handing her dresses, and she puts them on every time you beat a mini game. She's like, "Hey, look, this new dress I'm wearing." And then she leaves and almost invites him to a party, but he's too embarrassed to go to the party. It's super strange. And I've no idea. These characters haven't really gotten Charles Martinet. He does a great job, but most of the time he's just going wow, or yeah, or wahoo, or whatever, little short lines. And there is so much just Wario talking in this game. Straight up just Wario dialogue about how he's going to make a bunch of money by doing a video game tournament. He sees this thing on TV, and this new video game is selling super hot. And so he's like, I'm going to do a video game tournament, call up all my friends to make games, and then I'm going to make a ton of money. And I didn't expect that at all, going into this. I was like, I know what WarioWare is. You just play the weird mini-games. But there's so much more to it. One of the new characters is 9volt's mom. So you remember in Game & Wario, there's that game, I think it's called Gamer, where you use the Wii U gamepad to play mini-games, but then you have to, hide under the covers because your mom comes into the room and, is a demon and will kill you otherwise. And I think there's a Smash Brothers stage.
Smash stage, right?
Yes, the Smash Brothers stage is based on the Gamer portion from Game & Wario. But his mom is called 5volt, and so you play as 5volt, and her little vignette is her watching TV commercials, and some exercise guy comes on and she's like, "Oh yeah, this infomercial, I'm going to get fit." And then the rest of the mini games is her just working out in the living room while you do mini games. The thing that's really reminding me of actually is Elite Beat Agents, because Elite Beat Agents had a lot of these weird interstitial moments where it would be this almost story setup that didn't really make any sense and was just strange for the sake of being weird. But But yeah, it's pretty great. I like it a lot, and like they're all quite short. They don't outstay their welcome, and there's so many of them. You unlock all of them at the end, and I went to kind of the movies portion of the, like it's kind of like Twisted, where in Twisted you would have the slot machine and you get new toys and mini games and things you'd unlock, and they have all the videos listed there. One of the funniest things that I might do a video of is you can take these cutscenes and you can record your own audio over the top of them. So you can just play the characters, like read their lines as the video plays, and then watch back a version of the cutscene with you as the voice actor for these cutscenes.
That sounds great.
It's amazing. And I was like, wow, that is the most ridiculous thing. Why would you put that in a game? But they did. So maybe I'll just mess around with that and upload one of those as a video. It seems really, really weird. And, WarioWare has always been a strange franchise. It's always been something that's kind of defies explanation, because it's a mismatch of like different art styles and different ways of interacting with the games, and you have like 5 seconds to figure out what's even going on. And I was worried because I thought, like, with this game, which has twisting games and mashing and also touchscreen stuff, what if you get to a moment where you're doing all of those at once? And the end of the game is kind of like that, where it's like, here are the Ultra Leagues, and during the Ultra Leagues, you basically have to do all of the minigame styles within one kind of mode. But it does the similar thing to the Wii game, where that like showed you what pose you needed to get into before the minigame started. So before each minigame, it'll be like touch, twist, mash, twist. And so you'll always know right before what you have to do. I tended for those ones to not use the stylus because it was a pain, like having the stylus always in my hand if I needed to twist it or if I needed to press the buttons. So I just used my fingers a lot for the touchscreen stuff. But it seems like a really good selection of mini games. Obviously, the best ones are the Nintendo ones. Those are my favorites, where they have these weird little micro challenges, like the Wind Waker landing on the thing. There's the Mario Sunshine one, where you're like moving FLUDD up and down to clean off a wall, get rid of all the goop on it. There's one which is the Wii menu, and it tells you to click on a certain channel on the Wii menu, so you have to like move the pointer. There's one from Fire Emblem Awakening. You basically move Chrom on a grid and you have to move him to attack an enemy and just attack them quickly enough. There's one with the Switch where you snap the Joy-Cons on. It's really good. You just use the touchscreen, snap on the Joy-Con. There's one where you place the amiibo on the new 3DS as if you're scanning it. And I think because this is an Intelligent Systems game, they gave a shout out to one of their lesser known franchises, which is Pushmo. There's a Pushmo minigame as well, where you just jump up to the top and hit the flag. And so it's really cool. And there's a lot of ways in which WarioWare Gold is a love letter to Nintendo in more of a way than even Smash Brothers is, especially in terms of Ultimate. And I don't know your feelings on Ultimate, Bill, but for Bali and I, it's a real bummer that we don't have trophies anymore. And like the JPEGs of the spirits have never been a thing that I'm that interested in, even though I collected a bunch of them. Because it used to be that you'd have so much history of like telling you when this thing happened and a little bit of text about it, and you just don't really have that. But now we have this kind of museum of Nintendo hardware on WarioWare Gold, where it's like, oh, did you know that Nintendo had a vacuum cleaner in 1979 that was wireless and remote controlled and was kind of like those automated vacuum cleaners people have nowadays? They did. Apparently that was a Nintendo hardware thing that I'd never heard of. And it just lists a bunch of these things that you can unlock, which is super cool. One of the things that I found interesting, there's a minigame as well that was the Nintendo one, which is find the stylus on the new 2DS XL. Wow. Which is like almost a self-burn of like, haha, we put the stylus in a different place every time. Do you know where it is on the new 2DS XL? I didn't. I had to rotate it a bunch to figure out where it was.
Where is it?
It's on the bottom, so I think it's the same as the
new
regular
3DS
new 3DS XL. Yeah. So yeah, I played like 2.5 hours of it this morning. It's so much fun. It's reminding me why I loved WarioWare so much, which is just that quick. So there's so many moments of just comedy, just made me laugh from not even like, it's just a 1 second little joke, like visual gag or whatever. And they are so quick-witted with it. And it's just every time you see it, you're like, give it a chuckle and it like lightens your mood. It's such a cool series. I really hope that they don't let it die, because it feels like with Rhythm Heaven and with WarioWare, the end of the 3DS's life cycle, they're like, here's best of collections for both of these series. Almost feels like they're sending them off in a way, but I hope that's not
come
the
back
case.
to Switch. I thought they both did pretty well commercially.
The one disappointment is there's no 3D in this game, so there's no like 3D like micro games.
Yeah, they really went away from the 3D in the last stint of the 3DS life cycle.
I think they were just having trouble with it. Like it requires a lot of extra processing power in order to do that 3D stuff, because you're rendering everything twice. So I think a lot of times that's why they don't do it. Like Pokemon, it had frame rate issues without doing 3D.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think it's I understand why they did that. It was a cool idea. I'm glad that most developers said, forget it. That's not the important part. The important part is the gameplay. Even though
you're on the wrong podcast here, Bill, because we love 3D.
I know. I listened to this podcast, but I played Ocarina of Time on my 3DS, and I adored it. It looked amazing, but most of the time, the 3D doesn't. It's just not as good at, like, nobody does it as good as Nintendo does.
Sure, yeah. They obviously know how to use it the best. Like 3D Land is remarkable use of it. Pilot Wings is a great use of it. And I think my only thing is, like, WarioWare is a series that is built around the gimmicks or the quirks of the system it's on. Which is why I was like, it's a 3DS one. Maybe they should do something with the 3D, because you could do something cool with WarioWare and that stuff. But again, like, it's never been such a focus in terms of gameplay that it affects anything along those lines. But anyway, if you've not played WarioWare in a while and you're feeling like you need to get back to some of that micro game nonsense, I would highly recommend picking this up. I got it very cheap. It was like £5 in an Argos sale. You know, as I've been saying, I'm picking up these 3DS games as cheaply as possible, getting as many as I can. You know, packing up for the coronavirus, so I have enough backlog games to just push through. It's a pretty good idea to get on it. So
I just checked; It's $40 on the eShop right now.
Yikes!
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Do you think it's possible that this game ever comes to the Switch?
I would more likely think they would do a Switch exclusive WarioWare at this point.
It'd be a little disappointing if it did come to the Switch. Really, it'd be a bit like. Not that it's disappointing Mario Kart 8 came to the Switch, but it kind of signaled that, we're going to have to wait a long time for an original Mario Kart. It's that kind of feeling. It's like, but I think there's a decent chance they might just port it.
Yeah, I mean, there's no, like, WarioWare on a virtual console supported system at the moment. Like, if they start doing a GBA Nintendo Online service, then the first one would probably pop up on there.
Which is a very good one.
It's very good, yeah. The original is great. The GameCube one is also very good. Probably the best multiplayer WarioWare game out there.
It's the same game with the multiplayer.
The multiplayer stuff is different. That's the cool thing about it.
That's the best bit.
Great. Well, that is going to wrap us up for the first segment. Thanks for listening, folks. Don't go anywhere, though. We'll be right back talking about 10 of the most important Nintendo/important to Nintendo games of the last decade. Join us in a bit. All right, folks, welcome back to the second half of the show, in which we are going to be deciding a list, unordered list, I should say, because otherwise we'd probably tear each other's throats out. So it's going to be 10 games that are the most important for Nintendo in the last decade. Now, important, when I say important, it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be the best games. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a good game, even. It doesn't necessarily have to be a remarkable game, but it has to be important for a reason for Nintendo. So this could be anything from it did very well commercially, it was innovative, it was important in terms of what Nintendo were doing at the time and how it changed their trajectory potentially. Lots of different reasons. But we're going to go around the table and each pitch a video game. And we're going to decide if it should be on the list, if it should be off the list, and then we're going to come to a big decision by the end. Are we ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Who wants to go first? Should I go first? Anyone else wants to go first?
I think
Sure.
you should go first.
You go
All right.
first.
I'll
Set
go
the
first.
example.
All right. My pick for the first one, let's just go with the obvious one. Let's go with the obvious one. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is one of the most important video games for Nintendo in the last 10 years. I don't think I really need to say much more about it other than it's probably the most innovative thing Nintendo has done in terms of its changing the dynamic of the open world formula. It was a critical darling. It launched the Switch to the heights it's at today, and it performed probably better than any Zelda game ever made.
And change the Zelda formula.
And changed the formula.
As well as the open world formula. But yeah,
So, anyone want to argue that it shouldn't be on the list?
definitely.
I don't think it should be on the list.
It's not good enough, is it? It just doesn't hang here.
You've kind of nailed it. The Switch would have failed without Breath of the Wild.
Yeah, like it. I mean, it. You look at that press conference, right? We talked a little bit about that, like live events and stuff, and Koizumi with the shaking of the ice cubes and the Joy-Con. But coming off of that, I don't think anyone thought the Switch was going to do as well as it ended up doing. And obviously, a large part of that is just because Zelda was so damn good that people bought the system just because of it. Even though it was available on Wii U, you could have bought Wii U and bought Zelda. I think that version of the game is probably quite rare at this point. Like, if you own a Wii U copy of Breath of the Wild, hold on to that for the collector market for sure.
Had this game not come out on Switch and only on Wii U, do you think it makes it on this list?
Ooh, interesting.
I think it's debatable. I think it might just make it. Just because it reinvents the Zelda formula, reinvents the open world formula. I don't think it would have done as well commercially, obviously. And then I'd even argue it wouldn't do as well critically because there is this like review bump you tend to see with Switch games that is very unfair in a way. But the Zelda brand does give stuff a bump, like undoubtedly.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, I get that. Also, like, it's one of the most remarkable pieces of entertainment ever conceived by humans. So, like, I get where you're coming from, but also, I think it does, even if it was on the Wii, in some ways, okay, here's a controversial statement. In some ways, had the Switch never been a thing and Nintendo were doing well with the Wii U, Breath of the Wild could have been a better game on the Wii U, because the gamepad was initially going to have all this interactivity in terms of the map screen and the inventory changing and all that stuff that would have streamlined a lot of stuff in that game and made it so that you don't have to hold like 9 different buttons to get the correct bow and arrow that you want. Like one of the criticisms I guess people do level at Breath of the Wild is its controls can be a little tricky to get used to. You do get used to them eventually, but you know.
It's a lot, but for the amount of things it does, it is actually a very streamlined set of controls, totally.
For sure.
I wonder if, let's say the Switch wasn't even a thing, do you think that Breath of the Wild would have been enough to save the Wii U?
No.
Because the Wii U was falling on its face at that point.
I mean, the Wii U's check was written as early as like 2013, right?
Yeah.
People knew it was going south. There was nothing like it's just the messaging of the system and as much as I love the Wii U, as much as for me it's kind of perfect because like it does just the gamepad, the way that you can like back in the day, I didn't have a good desktop PC. Like when the Wii U came out was around the time when I was starting to get into like getting a PC and stuff like that. I used the internet browser on the Wii U to watch YouTube videos all the time, and I was able to like look at Twitter while the YouTube video played on the screen. It was like so good, and we don't even have an internet browser on the Switch. It's ridiculous. But that system and its weird eccentricities worked for me. But I am very weird. I'm not a regular consumer, you know.
And like for us with the show, it was a virtual console box. Like we went back to a ton of games that neither of us had played.
It was the first time that they had save states for virtual console games, which is a big help.
We played a ton of virtual console games, and there's a ton of first party quality content, I would say, on the system. That yes, Breath of the Wild is a tier above that, but there are still really incredible Wii U first party games that
which at this point the identity's kind of been stripped from it because most of them are on Switch. So you know. It's a shame. Cool. Who wants to go next?
Bill, do you want to jump in?
Sure. I'm going to say Splatoon.
Yes.
And the one on the Wii U, the original Splatoon, because the reason why I feel like it's an important one is because it said, hey, look at us, we're Nintendo, and we can make any kind of game. And we can make any kind of game in a new way. And it was their first competitive shooter. And it was incredibly weird, and it showed that Nintendo has the ability to go into any genre and just knock it out of the park.
Totally. It's like it's one of the most innovative blending of mechanics I've ever seen in terms of going into the ink to increase your movement, but it's also how you reload your weapon. That is such a genius stroke of game design, just melding those things together. And that's all you really needed to like get it off the ground. Once they have that in place, like the rest of it is just gravy. And obviously I think Splatoon stands out because it is their most successful new IP in such a long time. You can argue about like what new IPs they had, whether the Wii series of games was new IP, but like in terms of character driven, like new identifiable Nintendo characters in a world, Splatoon was just this smash hit in terms of their, you know, just doing something different that they hadn't done before.
And not only that, but they're like, when it happened, we were in this rut of seeing the same IP, not just from Nintendo, but the industry across, seeing the same IPs over and over and over again. And Nintendo said, we're going to do something new. We're not going to do a Mario game. This is Splatoon, and you're either a kid or a squid or you're both. And everybody said, what the hell kind of drugs are you on? But man, it was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's now like a proper tentpole title, really. Like it's maybe not like the absolute top tier like the Mario Karts of this world, but you know, I'm looking at this list. Splatoon 2 is 9.8 million sales. It's the 7th most successful game on Switch, and it is now a huge brand going forward that they are going to keep investing in.
Totally. I had this as the second one on my list, so I'm glad you took it straight away, Bill, because it really, like, if you talk about things that Nintendo did to innovate, to change, to just break out of the mold, Splatoon smack dab in the middle of the decade in 2015, and yeah, it was breath of fresh air. Absolutely was. And in some ways, I wouldn't say I prefer the first game. I think it's a similar situation to like Ori and with Galaxy. Is like the first one's the impact of like, whoa, this is new and different, and the second one is like, it's a better game, it improved on everything, and that's kind of the one you probably should play today is the second one. But
and if you look at like the original trailer versus like Splatoon 2, the style has actually evolved a little bit. Like there is the very distinctive look to the kids.
Splatoon 2 actually looks a lot better visually, and I don't think I noticed that when the game came out, but it's a much nicer looking game, much smoother. It's very, very good. So yeah, let's keep that on the list, at least for now. I think it deserves to be there. Bally, what you got?
Well, both are pretty safe picks so far, so I'm going to go a little bit outside.
Okay, bring some danger.
Zone. I'm actually going to pick a game I've not even played.
Okay.
And this is a game from last year, and that game is Ring Fit Adventure.
Okay.
I think this game is important to Nintendo because, as we've said before in the show, Nintendo will always, since the Wii and the DS, I believe Nintendo will forever value the mainstream market who don't play a ton of games, who aren't that into video games at all. But I think Nintendo will always be wanting to throw stuff at the wall to see if they can make something stick that can be the next Wii Fit, the next Wii Sports, you know. And yes, they tried 1-2 Switch with the launch of the Switch, and to be honest, that game has actually to date sold a little bit more than Ring Fit Adventure. But I think it's not just about the commerciality; it is that critical aspect. And Ring Fit Adventure got people talking about Nintendo in a way that they've not talked about Nintendo for, in my view, a very long time, from the DS and Wii era, where in a way that 1-2 Switch just simply didn't do that. And it showed that even in the era of the Switch, where you've got your Mario Odysseys, your Breath of the Wilds, your more traditional style of games, they can still do something that appeals to a completely different market and absolutely hit out the park. And this is a game I really want to play. It's had so many people who were very much into the sort of more mainstream Wii Fits, Wii Sports say, hey, this is just as good, if not better. And it is critically acclaimed and actually has sold like around 2 million copies and will probably go up. And I just think that moving forward, it's a real staple in this decade that Nintendo has actually managed to do a really impressive game in that mold that reminds you, hey, Nintendo are not just a video game company, they're more than that.
Yeah, the thing with Ring Fit Adventure for me is it was right at the end of last year, and I don't know we've had enough time to see its impact necessarily. I would say like it potentially could have wide rippling impact, especially this year. And you're talking about how expensive that thing is right now because people in China are buying them off the internet because they can't leave their homes and they need like fitness indoors. And that, you know, going forward, I guess would be a big thing. I guess for the entirety of the last decade, I don't know if I would call it as important or influential, just because, you know, it is a game that we just don't know where its long tail is yet. So that would be my argument against it. But what do you think, Bill?
I don't know that I have an argument against it that is different than yours, but I do feel like we need to. I don't see anybody coattailing this yet.
Yeah,
and maybe we will sometime this year, like Microsoft or Sony will come out with, because that's what happens as Nintendo does something cool. And then everybody else is like, well, let's do our version of that.
Yeah, exactly. It's Sony's business model for the last 20 years.
Right. And we haven't had a chance to see that happen. I do, however, have to say that they have been struggling to keep this in stock in Japan.
Yes.
And just yesterday, I talked about the fact that it's out of stock here in the States. And it's incredibly popular. People are buying it. And if there's something out there that reminds, and I think Bally said something perfect here, it reminds everybody that Nintendo is not just a video game company. They are something that is beyond a video game company, and this points to that in a big way. So I don't know. I say we could put it on the list only to get knocked off the list later because we only have 10 spots, but I'm okay with it being on there.
Cool. Yeah, we can leave it on for now. We'll see how it goes. I think the other thing with me is they did kind of do this before. Obviously, this seems to be much more effective than something like Wii Fit, and obviously Wii Fit doesn't like qualify for this decade unless someone wants to pitch Wii Fit to you. Anybody? No. Yeah. So that's why I am a little more reticent for it. But I think, you know, this could be one which potentially you talk about for this next decade could be even more important. We'll see. Cool. So I guess it's back to me. I'm going to make a pitch for one of my favorite series, and this game absolutely has to be on the list. It is Fire Emblem Awakening. Fire Emblem Awakening revived a dead series that is now, I would say, among like the top 3 profitable entities for Nintendo. Maybe not.
Top 3?
Top 5, probably.
Top 5. I'll give top 5.
Fire Emblem Heroes makes cash money. So we'll,
it's number 1.
Oh, in terms of mobile games, Fire Emblem Heroes is, yeah. But Fire Emblem Awakening, which I want to put on the list, is the game that brought the series back. Obviously, it had been localized back in the day on Game Boy Advance. There was a small crowd of people who really liked it. You know, people got to know the characters through Smash Brothers, and then, you know, slowly the games came out. You know, some of them weren't that great. Like Radiant Dawn, I was not a big fan of. Shadow Dragon is just bad. And like the sequel to Shadow Dragon, which was the remake of the third game that only came out in Japan, you know, that never got here. So Awakening was this last-ditch effort for Nintendo to be like, and they said it. They said if this one isn't successful, then we're never making another one of these again. The series is going to go away. And you look at the remarkable turnaround that happened as a result of Fire Emblem Awakening. It was just a critical success. More people flocked to the series because of the innovations they made in terms of classic mode versus casual mode, just the accessibility, the kind of dating sim elements added to just appeal to a different audience. And it's gone on to, like last year, people couldn't shut up about Three Houses. Like it was one of the biggest talked about Nintendo games of the year, in Game of the Year conversations, and all of that. The mobile game, the amount of money that makes for Nintendo, all of that starts and ends with Fire Emblem Awakening. It is very, very important to this decade of the identity of Nintendo and the way that they have kind of run their franchises. So yeah.
I had this on my list as well. I can't argue against it.
Yeah, I agree. It totally rejuvenated that series and is now one of Nintendo's biggest series, and it's a very good game. Totally.
Yeah.
And it's a game that is like, it's actually like 3 games. You know?
Right.
There are parts of these games that are for different parts of the audience. For instance, I could not care less about the interactions with the characters. I just like the combat.
Totally.
And then there's other people who could not care less about the combat, but they love the interaction with the characters. And I think that's one of the reasons why it does so well. And you're right. The changes that they made in Fire Emblem Awakening to make it more accessible to a larger group of people were instrumental in making this series in the forefront of Nintendo's library.
Totally. And also it's just like, it's a damn good game as well. Like it did well because they had those accessibility things, but also the game design was as strong as it has ever been in the series. You know, maps and variety, and even like I love the visual design of that game. I like Three Houses is great, and the 3D stuff, it looks pretty good, but I love the sprite stuff of the old games, and the fact they kind of brought sprites back for the maps. I enjoyed that a lot. Even though the characters didn't have feet, and that was an interesting thing that there were news stories about. It's like very weird back then. Cool, so let's think that goes on the list then. All right, Bill, back to you.
Okay. This is not a Nintendo game.
Okay.
But I think it was very important to the success of the Nintendo Switch, and that is Fortnite.
Okay.
Fortnite, when it was announced at E3 2 years ago, am I right on that?
Yeah, it was 2018, I believe. When that came out.
Yeah. So 2 years ago at E3, when they finally said, "Hey, look, and Fortnite is on Switch." Fortnite was, excuse me, I had to cough. Fortnite was this juggernaut in the gaming industry. It still kind of is, and it was not on the Switch up until this point. And when it came to the Switch, that sold a lot of Nintendo Switches, just being able to play Fortnite on your Nintendo Switch, whether you're playing on your TV or you're playing in portable mode. That was huge, absolutely huge. And I think that Fortnite is one of the most important games for Nintendo in the last 10 years.
I didn't have on the list, and I was kind of thinking to myself, like, I don't know, like these games like Minecraft and Fortnite, they are very important generally, but how important are they to Nintendo? And I don't know, because I didn't look at like the sales numbers and how much they spiked around when Fortnite came to the Switch. Obviously, like anecdotally, I was working as a tuition center manager, and kids would come in all the time during that period of time and talk about Fortnite and nothing else, and there were kids who brought their Switches in and they were playing Fortnite, and that was the way they got to it. But also there were a lot of kids who played it on iPad or on iPhone, or their older brother had a PS4 or an Xbox that they played it on. And so I think Fortnite is one of the most important games of the decade, but not necessarily just for Nintendo. But what I will say, and this kind of just came into my mind thinking about it, the Switch version of Fortnite forced the crossplay conversation that was happening, right? Because Sony were being real assholes about it. They weren't doing crossplay. They were just not budging from it. And as soon as the Switch one came out, you had all these people being like, oh, weird, if I made an account on PS4, I can't use that account on Switch. And so it got this conversation going of like, you can't even use the account you were using on Sony, even if they're not doing crossplay. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back, I think. It's like, as soon as it came to the Nintendo system, it forced the conversation and made it so that Epic had the leverage to get that entire crossplay thing going through PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo, and across, PC and iPhones and iPads and everything. So that might be the thing to clinch it for me, because it is hugely influential, hugely important for Nintendo itself. Arguably not, but again, I do think that's important context for when it was happening. How do you feel, Bally?
I was going to say it could probably make the list, but if we were doing this list in 10 years' time, it might not make the list for the reason that it was the game that killed Nintendo, in the sense that there was a point where it was growing so big, and particularly on like mobile, iPad, and yes, of course, it's still it's huge on Switch and like PS4, Xbox, etc. But like, it felt like at a point that this was all these kids playing this Fortnite away from consoles was gonna kill the console. And I don't have that view now, and it probably won't kill the console, but to argue that it's something that's been healthy for console gaming, of which Nintendo is still a very big part of that market in a sense, I guess, I feel a bit mixed on. So I would feel comfortable probably putting it on this list.
At the moment.
Yeah, it's certainly one that I could see dropping. But yeah, it's just interesting. I don't think it would make the same list in 10 years.
Yeah, potentially.
But yeah.
All right, Bally, what you got?
Okay, got a few options here. I'm
Okay.
going to go for this, another safe one.
Uh-huh.
And this is quite purely, we're talking commercial success, and it's got to be Mario Kart 8.
Okay, yeah.
This thing, as short as the Wii U's life cycle was, this game almost kept the Wii U alive. And it was also just an incredible seller to launch the Switch with, alongside Breath of the Wild. And to this day is on like 23 million sales, I believe, on Switch. Is the number one game sold on Switch. For us Mario Kart fans, it unfortunately feels like it's delayed the next Mario Kart, and that's life. But it's for the sheer way that it's propelled Switch sales especially, but also Wii U sales at the time. I think it's undeniable that in the last 10 years, it's one of the most important games for Nintendo, and should be on the list.
Yeah, it's a game that has lived twice. It had a stint, and then it had another one, and the second one definitely far more successful on a very popular platform. Obviously, like, Mario Kart is always important to Nintendo, but I think Mario Kart 8 is interesting. It's not a huge leap forward. I think it's like this coalescing of all the ideas of previous Mario Karts into this package that is extremely well polished and has all these other things in it, in terms of, you've now got Splatoon characters, and Link is in it, and F-Zero tracks are in there. Like, the DLC did a huge amount to elevate the status of Mario Kart 8. And obviously they added a battle mode in the Switch version too, which was one of the deficiencies of the initial release. Yeah, I mean, it definitely probably should be on the list. My argument against it is it's a bit boring, just because, yes, it's Mario Kart, it's gonna do well. That's maybe my only argument against it, is like, how important is it really? Because like, Nintendo could kind of shit out a Mario Kart and it would, sell 1 billion copies.
But rather than say, comparing it to a bad Mario Kart, compare it to maybe not having a Mario Kart. Like, Mario is the staple. Like, it's got to come out. Even though I agree critically, even if a bad one came out, it would sell like hotcakes.
Sure. What do you think, Bill?
Well, I'm struggling, just deciding if Mario Kart 8 or Mario Kart 7 should be on this list.
Oh, interesting.
More, because Mario Kart 7 is one of the most high sales ever, and man, oh man, there's a lot of 3DSs out there, and I don't know. Can we just combine them into like the franchise? It's so hard to just differentiate between 7 and 8. Yes, they're very different games, but
I mean, fundamentally, like the ideas from 7 are just used again in 8, right? Like the gliding and the underwater stuff, and they just added a gravity mechanic to it in 8 to just twist it almost. And obviously, you know, it's on a much more powerful system. It looks much better. You know, it runs really nicely. Like the hand, I don't own Mario Kart 8 on Switch, so maybe that's an argument against it. It's the fact that, you know, we bought it already and I'm not buying it again, Nintendo. But yeah, I feel like it's one we can put on for now and could come off potentially. I don't feel super strongly about it. So with 7, I don't think 7 actually sold as well as 8 did.
I'm looking at it here. It was 18.7 million.
Right.
And what's 3DS sales on, like 40, 60 million or something, right?
Yeah, 70 million 3DSs, I think,
70
overall.
million, right.
Yeah.
So, the attachment rate is much, much higher on Mario Kart 8. It's like freakishly high.
It's almost 50%, which is just mind-boggling.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I think if we're talking about like a mainstream crowd of importance and like how Nintendo hit an audience, 8 would be the one I would choose probably. Even
That's
though,
fair.
you know, if we're talking about best Mario Karts or best-selling Mario Karts of all time, the Wii game is like up there with the DS game. They're both like almost untouchable, but you know they weren't this decade, so they don't.
I mean, the 3DS one is still like the best-selling game on 3DS.
Well, yes,
and
yeah.
3DS was a big part of the last decade,
and that's kind of my argument. Is like it doesn't really matter what the Mario Kart game is. It's probably going to be the best-selling game on the system, regardless of what it is. You know?
It is, but I do think 8 is, with that attachment rate in particular. I know Wii was a much bigger deal in some senses, but there's something about 8 that's just like, I think it's because it was at launch. I think that is a big difference between it and 7 and Wii.
Sure.
And the way that I look at 7 as being important is because it, like the 3DS sales and 7 buoyed Nintendo in those times when the Wii U was just falling on its face.
Right.
That's
a
it kind
good
of
point.
rescued them. But I'm fine with either of the games being on there. I do have a question for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
If you said, you know, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe coming to the Nintendo Switch delayed the next Mario Kart game, what do you think they could possibly do to differentiate Mario Kart 9 from Mario Kart 8 to make it different? Because it's just Mario Kart.
Right. And that's why they need to make it Smash Brothers. That's the ultimate thing with Mario Kart. I think we both feel similarly that, you know, Smash has been such a ridiculous marketing thing for Nintendo that is just never ending. And why would you not want to do that with another juggernaut of a franchise, right? Like they're already beginning to do it with those other characters being in there. I say go the whole hog. Like make tracks that are based on all these IP. Like put Marth in there for God's sake. Have a Fire Emblem track, right? You know, just go the whole way and don't hold back. I think that's the direction they should go in, because at this point, you're right. Like the Mario Kart formula almost perfected with Mario Kart 8.
Yeah.
And I actually think there's a decent chance this E3 will have a trailer for Mario Kart to come out next year. It was one of my
that team made ARMS. That was the last game they worked on was ARMS,
Right.
So it's been a long time. They've cooked up
decent
something.
time.
Yeah. Okay. Is it back to me, I think?
I think.
So.
Let's go for a weird one. I am going to pitch Rayman Legends, and this game is important for bad reasons. Rayman Legends is a game that was announced initially as a Wii U exclusive. It was supposed to be a very close to launch window game that was going to be a third-party partnership with Ubisoft and Nintendo that was going to, you know, really help out the system and do some good stuff for it. The Wii U obviously did very badly, and as a result, Ubisoft then delayed Rayman Legends in order to release it on other consoles at the same time, foregoing exclusivity and making it irrelevant essentially to the success of the Wii U, and taking away a big exclusive at a point in time when Nintendo dearly needed one. I believe it was supposed to come out in like February or March and was delayed to the September. And I think it was just like the signal. It was the point at which the flag went up from Nintendo's end, and you're like, they are sinking fast. This is not good. This is really a bad situation to be in. And I think Rayman Legends just signifies that fall from grace almost. Like it is a partnership with a company they had worked very closely with, who then decided, you know, it's not worth it to go through with this because we're going to see a flop in sales if we do. Even though arguably Rayman Legends could have done something to help the Wii U's fortunes. It's a sad situation, but I think that it's a very important game for showing Nintendo like what they needed to do after the Wii U, right? It was a lesson for them in, hey, we can't just put out this weird system that third parties don't know what to do with. And like even in Rayman Legends, some of the Wii U tablet stuff in there, like it's fine, but it kind of feels a bit tacked on. It doesn't feel like something unique or that interesting. So that's my bummer of a pick is Rayman Legends. How do we feel about it?
I'm completely indifferent to this.
Okay. Fair enough.
Valley?
I would like to take your argument and turn it on its head.
Okay.
Where I think part of your argument, you're almost hinting that Rayman not launching with on its like initial Wii U date was partial, and you did say later signifying like the fall of the Wii U and like its relationship with third parties. So I agree with that sentiment more so than the idea that Rayman was part of, and it was part of the reason, but it wasn't like a big reason. I think the Wii U was destined for not great things, regardless of the situation of Rayman. Mm-hmm. And that's where I'd spin it and say that looking to the future and the success that has come on Switch and the relationship between Nintendo and Ubisoft, perhaps Mario versus, I can't even remember the name of this
Mario
game.
plus Rabbids.
Mario plus Rabbids should perhaps be on the list to signify how Nintendo have done a U-turn in terms of their relationship with a third party like Ubisoft.
Sure.
And done it very successfully, whereas they've got critical acclaim and commercial success out of that relationship. For that game come out in like 2018, 2017?
It was 2017. It was part of the hot year, yeah.
It was in that launch year, was part of the launch success, and I'd probably more so go with that on the list perhaps, although I think both have the potential of sliding off, but I think both of them have merit. I don't know.
I do have Mario plus Rabbids on my list, so
okay.
it is a potential substitute. I get what you're saying in terms of it. It's less that the game Rayman Legends itself is important, it's more what it represented was important.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And
I think so far the games are about more than just what they represent, actually, in a way, in that sense. So in that sense, I think that argument's a little weaker, but it could stay on for now if you wanted.
We'll see.
And if I had to pick between these two games, I would say Mario plus Rabbids belongs on the list more than Rayman Legends.
Let's put Mario plus Rabbids on for now.
Sure. And just to talk about that game a little bit, like, I remember getting told about it before it was announced, like, you know, it was leaked a bunch afterwards, but I remember being told by someone and being like, "What? Really? I heard the thing and I was like, that actually, like, that could be good potentially." So I was a little less skeptical than a lot of people. But when they did that E3 presentation, Miyamoto on stage, what a thing! Like, what a turnaround in terms of public perception of what that game was. And it turned out to be such a good game, like an incredibly fun strategy game that solidifies like the relationship between Nintendo and other companies and gives us potentially something like Cadence of Hyrule. Like, does Cadence of Hyrule happen if not for Mario plus Rabbids? Maybe not. So it's cool. And I want to see more of that, right? Like, I want to see Nintendo lending their IP out to other people and letting them make cool stuff, because Ubisoft just took so much care and attention with this game, and it's really, really good. So sure, let's put that on. I like it. Bill, back to you.
All right. We kind of mentioned third parties.
Yes.
And I don't know if this belongs on the list. I just wanted to have it up for discussion. But
okay.
That first video that we talked about in the earlier segment, where the guy is, playing Breath of the Wild and walking his dog or whatever, and then when he's on the plane and he's playing Skyrim.
Yes.
And I think that was a huge signal to everybody that, oh my God, other companies are going to be paying attention to this game or to this system.
Yeah.
It was an indicator that the Switch was something to pay attention to. Even if we had all already played Skyrim, the fact that it was running on the Switch and Nintendo featured it in their initial unveiling was very important to the success of the system as a whole, in my opinion.
This is the example I actually gave to Bally when I was talking about this segment. And I totally agree with you. And I think it's not just that it's Skyrim, it's the fact that it's Bethesda. Like,
Right.
Bethesda have never worked with Nintendo before. Like, you would never see any of their games on their platforms, and yet the start of the Switch, the first couple of months, even the first couple of years, was defined by Bethesda, like a third party who had nothing to do with the company and were then their strongest supporter. It was unbelievable. Like, when I first saw Skyrim pop up, I was flabbergasted in that trailer, quite honestly, because it's the last thing you expect, right? You expect them to work with Ubisoft. You expect them to maybe get, token support from EA. But Bethesda, not in a million years is that going to happen. And yet it did. And that version is a really good version. Like, it was made by Iron Galaxy. They did an excellent port of the game. I've put 50 hours into it on Switch. It's such a good handheld version. And I think it also indicates, like, it kind of set the tone of, like, these are the types of games you can play on this system now. It's not just 2D platformers. It's not just Nintendo first-party games. Big open-world experiences can exist here. And you can also have Doom and also have Wolfenstein, I totally agree. I think is... And, Skyrim's another one like Fortnite, where you could say, overall, Skyrim's one of the most important games of the decade. But I think, for me, Skyrim's a stronger argument than Fortnite is to tie it to Nintendo, just because of that Bethesda-Nintendo relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I totally agree with the points made so far. There's not much more I can add, honestly. I own this game and need to play it.
Yeah, you're one of, like, 2 people who've not played Skyrim, but
right, somehow.
Probably should get on that. And I think we're in a weird place now where that game almost set the precedent for, like, all the PC style games we now see on Switch, right? We've got Larian putting out Divinity Original Sin 2. We've got all the Baldur's Gate games like Icewind Dale and Torment and all that stuff coming to the Switch, which is like Civilization is on, like, all these weird PC. For some reason, PC games and Switch like each other, and I don't understand why. I guess maybe touchscreen stuff potentially, but even a lot of those games don't really use touchscreen, so I don't know what kind of sparked this relationship, like why we now have Overwatch and Blizzard putting Diablo on Switch. It's a real weird situation we've stepped into, and yep, Skyrim was the thing that started that entire chain going, so it belongs on there. It's a good pick.
Great. Okay,
all right,
back to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you look at the success of the Switch, I think we can agree it's made up of a number of pillars. I think one of those pillars is Nintendo, first party, AAA success. I think another pillar has been in line with Skyrim and games like Wolfenstein, like the third parties coming on board. I think another pillar in that trilogy essentially is indies. And this is where I'm struggling a little bit, because I think in my mind there's 3 indies that really define the success of indies on Switch. 2 of them for a similar reason, and 2 of those are Hollow Knight and Stardew Valley. And what I mean by those is both of them were released on systems before the Switch, but when they came to Switch, not only did they sell incredibly well, they just completely dominated the discussion. They dominated the eShop. They propelled the Switch as the home of indies. And then the third game in that, which is just another fantastic indie game in that discussion and is also defined by the Switch, is Celeste. So obviously all 3 of these I don't think can make it on this list, but I do think of the indie games on Switch, one of these should be there as a representation of that incredibly important pillar for Nintendo at this point in time that was completely lacking on the Wii U, for example. And I do think it's those 3 games and games like Overcooked 2 and Overcooked 1 and maybe a handful of others that aren't coming to mind right now, but I think one of those games needs to be here. And if I had to pick one, I would probably go with Stardew Valley. But I know there's really good arguments to be made about Hollow Knight and Celeste as well.
I argue that none of them should be on the list because there's a more important indie game to the entire decade of Nintendo, and that is Shovel Knight. Shovel Knight is Shovel Knight is the indie game of the decade. It's the most recognizable character. It was on 3DS. It was defined by Wii U and 3DS when it first came out. It launched on the Switch. They finished out the quadrilogy of games last year. I love Hollow Knight and Stardew and Celeste. They're all amazing games. No indie game defined Nintendo in the last decade like Shovel Knight. And that's
according to this Game Informer list, Shovel Knight's not even in the top 10 like best-selling indie games on Switch. Its success was prior to Switch, and I'm talking about as a pillar of the success of Switch. So I get the argument, yes, Shovel Knight's important to Nintendo over the last decade.
Right.
But I do argue that's a different argument to what I'm arguing in the success of the Switch and the pillar of indies. Well, I think they're two separate arguments, they don't overlap a ton.
My argument is I think that Shovel Knight is more important because you're just focusing on just the Switch. And sure, the Switch has been a huge part of Nintendo's success, but you can't forget how important the 3DS was throughout the decade to carry them. And Shovel Knight, as an independent game, is really important to that success, right? Like, having that as a almost Nintendo first-party style product. They made an amiibo, for God's sake, of Shovel Knight, right? What other company gets that afforded to them? Like, there's very rare situations, like Dark Souls got an amiibo. I can't think of any others, really. Shovel Knight, for me, defines this decade of Nintendo indies. It is the most recognizable character, like all these things that I've said. What do you think, Bill? Are you going to break this tie?
Oh, God. I mean, part of me wants to throw another wrench in the works and say Untitled Goose Game because, that's a Switch exclusive. But the idea, if I have to choose between the ones that Bally is choosing and Shovel Knight, I feel like I got to say Shovel Knight as I hold the Shovel Knight amiibo in my hand.
That's the advantage.
I love Shovel Knight. Is Shovel Knight on other platforms other than Switch?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's on everything.
Other than Nintendo?
Yeah, it's because they did on PlayStation. There's a Kratos boss fight. On Xbox, I think it's the Battletoads boss fight they did. So yes, it is multi-platform, but so are all those other games, right? But Hollow Knight came out first on PC. That's where I played it. Stardew came out first on PC. That's where I played it. Celeste obviously came out day and date, so that maybe has more of an argument. But again, that game is on everything, and all these indie games are on everything.
Yeah, but look at the sales of like Hollow Knight and Stardew Valley.
Right, but that's not my argument. Right, sales is only one aspect of this. Right, sales is important, sure, but I think in terms of brand awareness and recognizability, Shovel Knight has higher brand awareness than any of those three games. Stardew might be the only one above it.
I don't agree with that sentiment necessarily. I think all four of them are quite similar levels of how aware people are of them. And the closest to that, I think, is Stardew Valley, honestly.
We've had like 6 years of Shovel Knight, right? These other games have only had a couple at most.
I agree, but I mean, Stardew Valley is more than a couple, but I think that...
I think you're just going along the lines of which game do you like more here, Bally, as opposed to what's more important.
No, totally. I'm totally not, but I do think that Shovel Knight's emphasis, as sad as it is to say, its emphasis was pre-2018. Like, it doesn't feel like Shovel Knight is as relevant to... And it is, like I said, it's a separate argument to say, like, it's about the success of indies on Switch. Yes, but a huge importance to Nintendo was defining themselves as the indie platform. I don't think Shovel Knight did that. I think those other games I suggested did. And that's the biggest change in the last decade. Where Shovel Knight, yes, it came to Wii U, but was Wii U ever defined as the indie platform? It was always like lacking, where Switch is unquestionably the indie platform, and I don't think Shovel Knight was a part of that debate.
But I think arguably...
If you're looking for a way to define the Nintendo Switch as the indie platform, I would say that Celeste doesn't do that. I would say that Stardew Valley doesn't do that. And I would say that Shovel Knight does not do that. I would say Untitled Goose Game is the game that shows that Nintendo Switch is the indie platform. However, if I were to pick out of all of these games that we're mentioning, Shovel Knight is my favorite of all of them. Right. So I don't know where to go with this.
Yeah, Shovel Knight's not my favorite. Like, I think Stardew is a better game personally. My argument for Shovel Knight is that it is the game of the decade, right? In terms of its importance and its influence and its recognizability, all of these aspects. And you know, it was day one on Switch in the eShop, right? Like, you could buy Shovel Knight day one on that system. And okay, other people had played it on other systems beforehand, which is probably why it didn't sell as well as some of these other games have. But I think it's inarguable to say that, like, Shovel Knight and Nintendo have been inextricably tied for the last 6 years of its development, and It is, to me, from 3DS to Wii U to Switch, it bridges all those barriers. It is the indie game that defines Nintendo and is important for Nintendo and is most identified with the company in terms of its influences as well over the last decade. So
you also do see a lot of Shovel Knight in other games.
Oh, he's everywhere. Yeah, like he was in Bloodstained even, which was weird. That was a really weird version of Shovel Knight I had to kill in Bloodstained.
I'm up for Shovel Knight being on this list, but I do think separately there should be an indie game.
You want a spot for another one, basically.
I think there should be a spot that is that defines the success of indies on Switch, which are so important to Nintendo right now. And as I said, I don't think Shovel Knight is part of that debate as much as I agree for Nintendo, Shovel Knight is important. But I do think one of these other maybe 4 or 5 games I've mentioned should be. And I don't feel strongly which one it should be. I think there's good arguments for different ones.
We'll see.
I'd probably side with Stardew Valley, but I do think indies on Switch is a huge pillar and is hugely important for Nintendo in the last decade and going into the future.
We can bump off one of these others potentially. We'll see.
Yeah. So I'm happy to vote on Shovel Knight for now. Of the games I mentioned, can we agree what we would want? A Bill saying Untitled Goose Game. I'd say
Celeste probably, if we're talking all of them, maybe.
You think Celeste? Okay.
Just because it came day and date, right? The Hollow Knight and Stardew were both PC games the year before, and Celeste was one of those first indies that was on the Switch day one. It's why I bought it on Switch. Otherwise, I probably would have played it on PC the year before, right?
Sure.
So
Hollow Knight and Stardew, I'd say like
Dead Cells is another one, right?
Dead Cells is a good example.
And my God, that game is incredible. And I'm only realizing that this year, but holy shit, that game's amazing. But yeah, it's about important, and I think this is a hard one. Maybe we leave it for now. We can come back to it.
Sure.
Because there's lots of options on the table. And maybe we'll end up not putting any of them on there, so we'll see. Okay, so that was you, Bally, pitching that one. So it's back to me. Let's cheat for a little bit. And let's talk about Pokemon Go. How do you feel about Pokemon Go being on this list? Because obviously it was made by Niantic. It's not a Nintendo game, but like the importance of Pokemon Go for Nintendo in the last decade, probably pretty up there.
Yeah. I don't think the film Detective Pikachu happens without Pokemon Go.
Sure, yeah. I actually have the game Detective Pikachu on this list as potential, but like it's not important really. It only exists because, the only important thing about it is that they decided to use it to make a movie. I don't think that game is remarkable in and of its own right.
Yeah, and it's that funny relationship Nintendo have with the Pokemon company. But did Pokemon Go contribute to the sales of Let's Go Eevee and Pikachu and Sword and Shield? I think probably.
I think Sun and Moon probably a bit more. That was like the game came out at the end of that year when the boom happened. So definitely it's important for the company in terms of brand awareness more than anything else.
Yeah, see, I just think regardless of Pokemon Go, as you say, like Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee and Sword and Shield were going to sell gangbusters on Switch anyway. So in that
probably,
sense, in terms of Pokemon Go, it's important to Nintendo to like keep Pokemon relevant. I don't know.
It's not. I don't think it's about relevancy. I think it's about just being the largest cultural event in the most recent times I can think of. Right? In terms,
do we know that Nintendo made a ton of money on the back of it?
No. Well, they did. They would have made however much percentage through their weird joint ownership of the Pokemon company, but it wouldn't be. It's not like Fire Emblem.
It's less about the money anyway.
Yeah, it's less about that. It's more about the cultural impact of Pokemon. What do you think, Bill? Is this cheating? How do you feel about it?
I don't think it's cheating. Man, I struggle. I'm struggling with this because I kind of agree with Bally that the other Pokemon games would have done just fine with or without Pokemon Go. And Pokemon Go, I know that there's still people that play it today, but it was very flash in the pan. It happened, and it was this ridiculous juggernaut of craziness where people were outside for once. And now it's like very few people would still play it. And when I say very few people, I'm just comparing it to when it was gangbusters.
Right, when it was the boom, because it's still like top of the App Store, millions of people still play it, but,
right?
Relatively.
But it's way lower. That being said, it's also Nintendo's kind of their first foray into the mobile space, although I would say Super Mario Run is more Nintendo, and this is really more the Pokemon Company, where, yes, Nintendo owns, like, that whole friggin' relationship is bananas. But I don't know.
Would we make an argument for a different mobile game, right? Would we make an argument for Super Mario Run being important in that it's the game that taught Nintendo people don't want to pay $10 for a game on mobile, and it forced them into the gacha market, essentially, with Fire Emblem being this enormous success as a result of that?
That is exactly the argument that I have written out on my list here for Super Mario Run.
Yeah, it might be the one to go with.
But I don't know if is there room for both for two mobile games on this list.
Yeah, that's tricky. Do you want to mention Mario Run then? What would your argument be for it?
Like you already said it.
Yeah.
Basically, Nintendo said, Miyamoto got up there at an Apple keynote.
Right, I forgot about that. He walks out on stage.
Miyamoto comes out on stage and he's like, I've got something for you. And suddenly everybody spit takes and was like, what is happening here? And he's like, and we're going to use this awesome business model, which I, as somebody who values video games, I think was a great business model. You play the first couple levels for free, and if you really like it, you pay $10 and you have the whole game. And Nintendo was trying to be the good guy. They were trying to do things the right way. And of course, the people out there who don't value games, they decided it was a giant ripoff and review bombed it to 1 star, even though it's a fantastic game. They showed it off and I said, there's no way that they're going to make this a good game. And they did. They made Super Mario Run to be actually pretty damn fun.
Yeah.
And it went nowhere because, it did very well, but compared to the other monetization models that are out there that are far more predatory, you completely summed this up in a much shorter way than I'm doing now, is that it taught Nintendo that you can't be the good guy.
Yeah.
You have to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
It's kind of like in Batman, where Harvey Dent says you either die the good guy or you live long enough to become the bad guy, and that's what's happened here.
It really is. It really is. And I think it's not helped by the fact that after Mario Run, they put out Fire Emblem Heroes and was just making so much money, hand over fist. The gacha mechanics, the Fire Emblem was custom built for that type of game, and you have this fervent fan base, and even if it is way smaller than the potential audience for Mario Run, these people are monetizable. These are people who are going to spend $100 to pull Hector and try and get their favorite character, So I like the argument for Mario Run. I think it's a strong one because it's so important to teach Nintendo. Not even you can get past the scum and villainy of the mobile market, How do you feel, Bally, about that instead of Pokemon Go, potentially?
Yeah, I agree with it versus Pokemon Go. And then just the wider mobile discussion is difficult to kind of think about. And it is one of those things that I just look on and feel really uneasy thinking about, like the mobile market. It's just it's something I'm personally not into at all. Is it important in video games moving into the future and in the last decade? Absolutely. It's huge. Pokemon Go showed that. It feels like Nintendo's kind of like they've got their place mark in the industry, if in that sense. They've not, and we've talked about this on the show before, MZ, but like Nintendo are all about revolutionizing industries. They're not about holding place marks in industries, and that's where the mobile market just feels so un-Nintendo, feels really dirty, feels really wrong.
And like speaking of Mario Run, I had this notion of like Nintendo innovate, right? They know how to change things. They can, they made Splatoon. What an innovation that was. And I had this hope of like, they're going to figure out mobile. They're going to do something that no one has ever seen before.
And they still might.
Sure, that's open to possibility. And then Mario Run got announced and I was like, I've seen, like, oh, of course, it's a very polished one. It's a well-made platformer with one hand. But like, it's not really that different from what you find on mobile generally. It's kind of just it's a platformer and you tap and you jump. And that's not the kind of revolution I was looking for. And so when that happened, I was like, well, throw in the towel. I guess Nintendo, not even Nintendo can innovate on this platform. It's kind of impossible in a way. So, yeah. I think that's a strong pick. Let's put that on there. Okay, we're getting close to 10 now.
We're already past 10.
We're past 10. But like, any strong picks that you want to put out there that you think should still make this list? Bill, you want to go next?
Is this our last go around?
No, not necessarily.
Okay,
but yeah, I'd say like we can go at maybe a quick fire round of like, here are some like lesser ones that we could argue
and
for.
There's let's go for like, if we got lots of picks left, let's maybe go for like the stronger ones, obviously. And
yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna cheat. Okay. I don't know. It's not one game. The NES Classic.
Oh, okay.
I think that is one of the most important things that Nintendo has done in the last decade is to bring out the NES Classic and, of course, its subsequent sequels. What do you guys think about that?
I think it's good and bad, right? Like, the NES Classic is painted with, oh, this is an awesome product. Also, no one can buy it. What the hell, Nintendo? We hate you.
Right.
So, like, it is important.
Is there anything more Nintendo than making something awesome and not letting anybody buy it?
Yeah, no, that defines them as a company. That's very, very true. I like it as a pick out of left field. I don't think it makes it, but I think it's a fun idea to throw out there for sure. I think the Super Nintendo Classic is better just because I think Super Nintendo games are better than what was on the NES, but as a piece of hardware, it's really nice. It's good. It does what it was supposed to.
Well, but that's kind of like the argument between Splatoon and Splatoon 2.
Sure, yes.
The NES Classic is the first, right, which, kind of started this whole classic industry,
right,
which everybody tried to follow.
Yeah, and the PlayStation one was a failure and a half. My God, that thing sank so hard.
Which is good for us because we were able to get it for like $20.
Sure, yeah, like it was very cheap. I'd question
its importance to Nintendo in the sense that they've not done or said much since the SNES Classic. Like, had we been sitting now on maybe like an N64 Classic, a Game Boy Classic, and Nintendo said, yeah, it's an important part of our revenue stream, it's important to get the awareness out about these Nintendo games. And
it's not had like the waves that you would expect potentially in terms of continuing the line of products.
Yeah, it felt like it could have been something really big and perhaps wasn't as big as it could have been. And I think that's kind of been echoed a bit by the NES Classic on the Nintendo Switch system, NES Online and the Super Nintendo Online. Like, they seem like they're a very side part of like Nintendo's goals right now. And as a result, their importance, I would argue.
Yeah.
I feel like this was important because, like, if you go back to when this came out, it was in the news nonstop. Everybody was talking about Nintendo again. And yeah, we had the Switch, but at the same time, everybody was like, NES Classic. Everybody was looking for them. It was constantly being talked about. It was a huge moment in video gaming and in Nintendo's history, I believe. And that's why I think it should be on the list. Yeah,
like I think it's very important. I guess it is cheating though. That's the other thing. It's like it's not a game.
It's not a game.
It's not a game. And the other thing I
tried to cheat.
The other thing I would say is that Nintendo have been selling us old games forever, and they still do it, and they keep doing it. And yes, this is a fun way to do it, and it was probably marketing wise one of the best ways that they've done it. But they have still sold us these games umpteen times, and will continue to do so. So like I like the idea. It's a fun idea. Don't think it makes it. But
I cheated. All right, fair enough. No cheating, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to cheat with Pokemon Go. That didn't work out.
That's true.
So, Bally, what you got?
I think when you're talking about Skyrim, you're talking about third parties getting involved. It's really important. It's huge news. It's fantastic. But when you start talking about Nintendo and their sort of more direct competitors, so Sony and Microsoft, I do think that Cuphead coming to Nintendo Switch, because it was before Ori, right?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
I think that's really important for Nintendo for what Cuphead commercially. Yes, Cuphead sold very well on Switch. It's another one of those big indie games that did very well. Exactly, but on top of that, I think the relationship between Nintendo and Microsoft could be huge going forward, to the point where Cuphead is the start of Game Pass coming to Switch in, say, maybe less than 3 years, 2 years time, 1 year time,
Yeah.
1 year's time. Maybe it doesn't make the list because we don't know the result of that relationship. And so far, that relationship has only resulted in Cuphead, Ori, and Banjo-Kazooie coming to Smash. To my knowledge, there's nothing more to that relationship than those 3 examples. So perhaps it doesn't make the list for those reasons, but it could be big.
Yeah, like for me, Cuphead is definitely defined more by Xbox than it is by Nintendo, and I like.
Yeah, it's almost Cuphead as a representation of that relationship more so than the game.
It's maybe it's more similar to like the Rayman Legends thing. Is like it's more what it represents than its importance to the platform or to the company, but. I see where you're coming from. It's maybe like similar to Mario plus Rabbids as well in terms of like relationships with other companies, but this is maybe one of the most important ones out there, which is 2 of the big console competitors doing business with one another very directly.
Which is kind of unique, right? Like, are there any other examples of that?
Aside from Ori, no.
I think that just heightens its importance.
Yeah, it is important. It's a weird one. Because it's also an indie, and it's also like important to the Switch. Is that the indie we choose as the indie that's important to Switch? Aside from
cover both
Celeste,
bases,
you cover both bases almost. Is that a good way to do it?
It's not sold anywhere near the levels of the likes of Overcooked, Celeste, Hollow Knight, Stardew. So that was more the argument I was making with that example. But perhaps
but it kind of is. It's kind of 2 birds with 1 stone, right? Like it represents this possible future with Microsoft and Nintendo, and the broader way the games industry is going, which is like, hey, these companies are actually going to work together instead of being sworn enemies.
I think it's certainly worth putting on above certain other things on the list now, and I think one thing we need to do is go back to the list and try and turn it into 2 groups, where we have a definite group and then a debatable group.
Sure, yeah.
So I'd be up for putting it on.
What do you think, Bill, in terms of Cuphead?
I think it's fair to put Cuphead in as the some indie game thing. But when I think of Cuphead, I do not think of Nintendo.
No,
even though it was on the Switch, because that game was around for quite a long time before it came to Switch. So I don't know. Yeah,
is it the argument that it's important to Nintendo because of what it represents?
Yes.
And is that a stronger argument than the Rayman Legends argument from before? I think.
But I don't know what it represents really, because they have, like, Microsoft has come out and said, look, we're not working on bringing games to other platforms. Those were deals that were in place before we acquired these companies.
I don't, in terms of Studio MDHR, because they don't own Studio MDHR. They're just funding that. They funded Cuphead, but
right, and it's so weird because then they went to that company and said, make a Switch port,
right?
Like, what? It's just the weirdest,
and like maybe that
thing ever.
Maybe why? I don't know. This is a really weird one because yes, Cuphead is such an Xbox game. It's so defined by that platform, but also I think it is the game that most represents Nintendo working with, if you want to call Microsoft a third party, but like
because it was
maybe
the first.
Yeah. And again, I think maybe this could be a stronger argument in 10 years' time. If we look back and everything has changed and like Game Pass is on Switch and Nintendo and Microsoft work together on loads of things, I think it's a stronger argument in 10 years' time, potentially. I don't think we know the full ramifications of it just yet, which I think that'd take it down a little bit of a peg, but yeah.
Sure.
Is there anything on this list that you think it would replace potentially? That it would come on in.
I think we should maybe lob everything on the list before we start cutting.
Okay.
We'll get there.
What? Looking at this list now, what is guaranteed? I think Breath of the Wild, Splatoon, Fire Emblem, and Skyrim, and Shovel Knight are locks. Those 5 for me are locks.
I agree with you on some of those.
Okay.
I agree Breath of the Wild's a lock.
Yeah.
I agree Splatoon's a lock. I agree Fire Emblem Awakening is a lock. I think Mario Kart 8 is a lock.
Okay.
I don't feel Shovel Knight's a lock.
Okay.
I'm saying my locks. I'm not saying my not locks.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
I'll just
That's
leave
fine.
it at that.
Okay, cool. Bill, any locks here for you?
I mean, I think we all agree that Breath of the Wild is a lock,
absolutely.
without a doubt.
Yep.
I feel like Splatoon is a lock. Oh gosh, Mario Kart is a lock.
Okay.
But there's still I still have 3 games that I can't believe that we haven't mentioned.
Okay.
Which is
Yeah,
driving me crazy.
let's get the list as large as possible.
Okay, all right.
Not
let's
as
do that
possible,
first.
but as within reason what we want to describe, and then
Sure.
Like, do we want a lightning round?
Yeah, let's go lightning
the rest
round
of these?
now. I
Yeah,
think
sure.
I've got
All right,
I've
whose
got
turn
a
is it?
couple.
Okay. Fire
Go
Emblem.
ahead.
My couple were Mario Odyssey
Okay.
Okay, that's
for very similar reasons to Breath of the Wild, but about reinventing that genre, really pushing on that first year of the Switch, etc. Commercially, critically, huge game. I'd actually also argue that one thing we've not mentioned yet, and is also very important to the Nintendo Switch and was a real surprise, is Nintendo's second parties. This is a stretch. I appreciate that. And that game is Luigi's Mansion 3. I think that game far surpassed what it should have and was a commercial and critical success in an era where the Switch is being buoyed on by more than just purely its AAAs. Because yes, it's a AAA, but it's not quite, the Odyssey, Mario Odyssey and Breath of the Wild of this world. But it represents like the Switch has a lot more quality and a lot deeper quality. And it's like a second party next level games.
My argument is that Luigi's Mansion 2 should be on this list because it's the one that brought Luigi's Mansion back. Like, that's the more important thing, I think, is it showed us not only can we bring back this franchise that only had one entry and can be wildly successful. That thing sold 6 million units on 3DS. It's one of the most successful 3DS games. But also it showed us that Next Level could take that franchise, shepherd it, and obviously they'd proved themselves with Punch-Out and with Strikers and stuff like that in the past. But I think Luigi's Mansion 2 is actually the point at which we should reward them for, because it's the one that got them to the point where we got Luigi's Mansion 3 in the first place.
Yeah, I'm happy for that game to be on the wider list. I don't think that argument, or even the argument I just said, makes top 10.
No.
But it can sit there if we want.
Yeah, sure.
And then I had one more cheat, which was Toy-Con.
Labo.
Toy-Con? Labo? What's Toy-Con?
Yeah. Toy-Con VR, do you mean?
Yeah, Toy-Con's part of Labo. I'm getting my words confused. Yeah,
Toy-Cons are what the things in the Labo sets are called.
Labo more generally, but yeah.
Yeah, Labo, I like it. It feels more like wacky Nintendo experiment that didn't quite go where it should have gone, right?
Yeah. I feel like Ring Fit Adventure is a better representation of arguments around that, and is a single game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if we're talking about weird Nintendo doing weird Nintendo things, Ring Fit I think is stronger argument than Labo is. As cool as Labo is, it's a weird thing, and I like it. Any quick fire ones from you, Bill?
Yeah, Mario Maker, the original on
that was on my list.
Wii U.
Yeah.
Mario Maker, Smash Ultimate is the biggest fighting game of all time.
I think Smash Ultimate we probably have to put on this list. And I think there are so many reasons for it. Its the way that it just is a juggernaut and creates hype around every single thing Nintendo does. The ripple effects of it, the way in which it is just a juggernaut is ridiculous. And, I have my complaints with the game in terms of, the trophies and lack of certain things and features that I would have liked to see. But you cannot argue the importance of that game to Nintendo in the current era. It is like Nintendo the video game. It's literally what it is. Mm-hmm. And it's also like video games the video game. So I think that...
Right, and then I also had Mario Odyssey on my list, and I can't believe that we went this far without talking about it.
Yeah, Mario Odyssey is interesting because I think that Galaxy 2 is probably... I wouldn't say it's the most important, actually. You know what? When I'm talking about it, like Galaxy 2, I think is a better game than Odyssey overall. But and Galaxy 2 is part of this decade technically because it was 2010. Odyssey, yeah, I would see the argument for Odyssey over Galaxy 2 is more important, probably. Although there's always an argument for 3D World, you know, important multiplayer for Mario. No, I don't like 3D World that much. I'm not going to argue for that. Cool.
Did you have any extras that you wanted to lightning round in, MDZ?
I got loads. None of these are going to make it. Xenoblade Chronicles, I think, was very important because that's a franchise for Nintendo now, and they didn't even want to release it in North America in the first place.
I had that on my list.
Yeah, I feel like it doesn't quite hang with a lot of these games, but like, my God, the project Operation Rainfall, the whole ordeal of even getting Nintendo America to pay attention to that game, and then it comes out and is a cult classic. Like, people adore it. It's one of my favorite games of all time, and you get a sequel on Wii U, you get a sequel on Switch, which does really well. Like, Xenoblade 2 has sold extraordinarily well for how niche of a product it is. And Monolith Soft as well. I think you kind of bundle this in as them as a team. The open world experience that Monolith lent to Nintendo's Zelda team for Breath of the Wild cannot be understated. Like, they are so important as a studio for Nintendo in the modern day.
And forget the sequels, they also have double, like, it's remade on the 3DS, and now it's going to be remade on the Switch as well.
Exactly, yeah. They're letting people play the original again on the Switch, which is amazing. So that's one I would like personally, but I don't know if it will make it. Bayonetta 2, because what the hell, that game, like, why does that exist? Nintendo made that happen. Sega weren't going to give the money for it, and I think it represents Nintendo caring about a good video game and like giving the core of their audience something spectacular, despite the fact that they know very well it's not going to sell remarkably. Like, I think it's just, for me, Bayonetta 2 is an attitude thing from Nintendo that I really like to see, which is them investing in very high quality stuff because they think it should be made. So that's potential. The other one was SteamWorld Dig, because I think SteamWorld Dig was like the first indie game that got Nintendo the ball rolling for indie games. Like, if we're talking about indie games, I think a lot of these other ones are probably more important, but SteamWorld Dig was like the first one where it was a 3DS hit and it was a big success out the gate and really represents what indies have become for Nintendo, which is like, it's a style of game that Nintendo players like. It's a 2D game, you know, like it was on the system and it spoke to people. And that company has gone on to be a huge supporter of, you know, Image and Form have done amazing stuff. And SteamWorld Quest and Heist and Dig 2, they, alongside Yacht Club, are probably one of the biggest, most important indie developers for Nintendo. So SteamWorld Dig. And then some other ones. Monster Hunter. I'm not a Monster Hunter guy, but I thought like that's important for the 3DS era. And Street Pass, which again is a cheat. The Street Pass games. How do you feel about Street Pass games making it, potentially?
I don't know. It depends on where you live. If you live in a city, then the Street Pass games make a lot of sense. But if you live in a rural place like me, the only time I ever got Street Pass things is if I happen to have my 3DS in my backpack when I went to a Best Buy.
Right, yeah. It's kind of like Pokemon Go. Like, if you were in the middle of nowhere with Pokemon Go, you had no gyms or anything, so... very true.
I think Street Pass probably doesn't make the top 10, but like it's in the discussion, I guess, you know?
Yeah.
Also, it's slightly cheating, but...
Yeah, it's slightly cheating. Okay, I think we got a good list there then. So can we decide then... I think Splatoon Breath of the Wild, definite locks. I think Fire Emblem...
Splatoon is a lock.
I think Fire Emblem Awakening is a lock. Do we all agree with that? I
do, Bill?
Yeah, I think so.
Cool.
This is where we end up getting to 15 games.
Yeah, I know. I actually think we didn't bring up until very late, but I think Smash Ultimate has to be a lock. Like, it's just so important, and it will continue to be important until at least the end of 2021, at which point they'll probably start the marketing machine up for the next Smash game, you know? Like, or they'll do more DLC.
Allie, what do you think?
I agree. I would lock one game before that, but I agree Smash is a lock.
What's the game that you would lock before Smash?
Mario Kart 8. I know it's a really boring argument, but I think when you're talking about importance for Nintendo in the last 10 years, it's quite hard to cut it. personally.
Yeah, I get that.
So we're
any
on
other
6.
locks? For me, the other locks are Skyrim and Shovel Knight.
I feel more passionately Skyrim's a lock than Shovel Knight, personally. But
Yeah.
I agree with that. I'm not sure about Shovel Knight. Seems like it should go on the maybe list.
Sure.
yeah,
I mean, we didn't talk about it very much at all, but I think Mario Maker is they reinvented Mario games with that game.
They made me enjoy playing 2D Mario games, which I think is a feat unto itself. It is very innovative.
I think Splatoon does the whole innovation argument way better, but I do think Mario Maker is the quintessential Maker game. I know Dreams has just come out, but it is the Maker game until Dreams will take its crown. In
terms of simplicity and approachability, it really is.
Yeah.
Dreams, definitely you can do a lot more with Dreams, but it's really complicated and you have to learn a lot. I do like Mario Maker. I don't know. I feel Mario Maker is a bit of an in-between for me just because...
it's an in-between for me as well, I think.
Because I think Splatoon represents Mario Maker. And I think also, in hindsight, Mario Maker 2, I wouldn't say disappointment, but man, it's not... You can't create things as seamlessly with that. And I think part of Mario Maker's legacy is Mario Maker 2, and I think it kind of doesn't quite hit the mark in a lot of ways.
I think Fortnite should probably be on the not lock list.
Yeah. I think Fortnite is better represented by something like Skyrim in terms of a third-party game on Switch and its identity tied to the Switch. I think Skyrim has more of an identity thing with that platform. I think Super Mario Run is a potential lock, honestly. If we're talking about the totality of Nintendo and mobile games, and just the way in which it changed their entire approach, and they literally gave up. They haven't tried to sell a mobile game in a proper way since this experiment, and it was a failed experiment. And I think
there's quite a lot of promotion around Mario Kart Tour, isn't that? Not.
Yeah, but that game.
Yeah, but that's Gachapon.
It's a gacha subscription.
Oh right,
battle pass.
They tried something unique, whereas Mario Kart Tour is not unique.
No, it's not.
Right.
Mario Kart Tour is just giving in. I think Mario Kart Tour represents the direction they gave up with, which is, oh, fuck it. People are just going to do whatever with mobile games and we'll make money because idiots are whales and they'll buy stuff. So.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And Mario Run was the turning point for that. It was...
What do you think, Bally? Is that a lock for Run?
Probably. I think it is because it's very different. It's not overlapping with anything else here as well.
Yeah, the reason for it being important, I think is very different, and I think it's important we have a bit of diversity in the reasons why. So, what have we got then? We got to decide on this indie thing. I think this is the next.
I do think
issue.
There's room on the list for at least one indie. I think there should be 2 indies probably. I think only having one in Shovel Knight wouldn't be representative of the importance of indies to Nintendo in the last decade,
Yeah.
I think that Mario Odyssey needs to be a lock myself.
I don't know. I feel so here's my problem with Mario Odyssey is it's very good. It's a very good video game, excellently made, supremely polished. But I think if we're talking about incredible Nintendo games of the last 10 years, you talk about Breath of the Wild versus Mario Odyssey, and Breath of the Wild is the one that stands in that. Not to say that we can't have things that are the same.
I think the 2 of them stand apart from everything else.
Yeah, but
right. In any other year, Mario Odyssey would have won Game of the Year from everyone.
Yeah, probably.
Totally.
And I really love that game. I think that its importance to Nintendo and the Nintendo Switch, not as ground-shakingly important as Mario Kart and Breath of the Wild and some of these other games. I think any type of Mario, even if they put 3D World out, people would have been happy. Sure, it wouldn't have had the critical acclaim. I don't know. I just have a weird thing with Mario Odyssey. I think it's a fantastic, excellent video game. It is going back to the style of game that they abandoned with 64, and building on it and doing different stuff.
I think it's much. It does a lot more than 64. It does reinvent 64 in a big huge open world kind of way. Like I would personally put it on the list for very similar reasons to Breath of the Wild. And I do agree with Bill. I think that it reinvents the formula. It shows that Nintendo can still make. They are still the king of 3D platforming, which is a genre which many other companies have given up on.
Yeah.
And we're not at the point where companies have given up on open world. So Breath of the Wild was very impactful for a slightly different reason, for reinventing open world in that way. But when you see so few 3D platformers come out, and then Mario Odyssey comes along, and it's just this thing that like the king of 3D platforming does it again kind of thing, that feeling. And to do it in the launch year of the Switch, like that, I think is incredibly important and should probably be in the top 10.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I see it. It's... Yeah, I don't know. I have a weird thing with Mario Odyssey. I love it, but for some reason I don't... I don't know.
So the games that we don't yet have, either as a lock or a not lock, we don't have Ring Fit Adventure in there, Mario plus Rabbids, some indie game.
Whichever one we choose.
Right. Luigi's Mansion 2 and Mario Maker. Are any of those on that list of the ones that I just said that you feel need to be a lock? Bally?
Bally voting for some indie game here.
I will vote for, out of that lot, I would vote for some indie game. I do think we will struggle.
Some indie game.
I do think we'll struggle to agree which one.
Are we just like gonna be cheating here and say, hey, all the indie games on Switch that are good?
Genuinely, whatever game it is doesn't really matter, because it is a team effort in that sense.
Yeah.
Like, it is about Celeste, it is Hollow Knight, it is Stardew Valley, it is Cuphead, it is Untitled Goose Game.
That's why Shovel Knight was my pick. Like, that's why I think Shovel Knight should be the pick, because it is a Switch indie and it is a 3DS and Wii U indie.
Yeah, I mean, it's not one of the indies that propelled the Switch indie scene, I would say. Like,
well, I mean, arguably it is, because it was a launch game, right? You know, and it was the type of thing people were buying straight away. And I feel like Shovel Knight, Shovel Knight has to be on the list for me. I can't really see a world where it's not on the list. Like, it is absolutely a lock in my mind, because it's not just that it's an excellent video game, it's that it is the most Nintendo independent game that has had the most association with Nintendo and that has had the most success on Nintendo, and is a character that you could legitimately think is 25, 30 years old and originally came out on the NES, right? Like, there's a brand identity, a way in which it synergizes with all of Nintendo that is much stronger than any of the indie games that have come to Switch since.
If I have to pick a game that represents the indie games as a whole, I would probably go with Shovel Knight.
Yeah, that's how I feel.
And what about Cuphead coming in as representing that crazy relationship?
I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, Cuphead's an Xbox game, and it just feels weird putting on a Nintendo list. It's a block, I think, for me. It's hard, man.
I agree with NBZ. When you say Cuphead, I don't think about Nintendo.
No. Yeah. It's very true.
No, I don't either. It was about its that relationship. But
and I agree, it is important, but we only get 10.
Yeah.
Because somebody made up these ridiculous rules. I won't say who.
Well, we have to get out of here at some point, otherwise we would be here for 24 hours just arguing nonstop.
So are we putting Shovel Knight as the indie game or no?
Is there a question to do 2 indie games, or is there another one in the not lock category that should be on there as the final game, essentially? Do we put a Mario plus Rabbids in there? Do we put a Fortnite in there? Like, what do we think?
My view would be that it feels like Shovel Knight is going to go on because you two are keen on it, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But I would argue there should be some other indie game that is a better representation of indies on Switch. Because for me, there's not another game on the list on the right that would make that
Snipperclips.
Final slot.
Snipperclips, that's
it was a launch game for Switch. It's an indie game. It was
Nintendo published. It's co-op. It uses the Joy-Cons, which is the identity of the Switch. when you take.
I would back one that does have high commercial and critical success, and those were the ones I'd said before.
Yeah, I mean, Snipperclips did okay, but it was a launch game, so
even though. I think part of why I say like Stardew Valley and Hollow Knight is because they completely came back on the table as discussion points and reviewing points, and the whole industry's like talking about those games even after they'd already come out on PC because they came out on Switch.
Right. I mean, like, I think Hollow Knight's the one that is the most representative of that, because Stardew Valley, people are talking about it incessantly no matter where it was.
Sure.
Hollow Knight, I think, got underlooked the year it came out, and then it came out to Switch, and I was like, you stupid people, I was talking about this last year, where were you, right? Like,
I would even argue Hollow Knight for a completely separate bunch of reasons about how it reinvents the Metroidvania genre and does something incredibly bold. It's the boldest Metroidvania I've ever seen or played. Like, it is bold in the sense of the exploration and the difficulty, and it set a benchmark as to like what that genre could be. And I do think as a tangential point, that genre is very important to Nintendo, both from a first party perspective, but also third parties succeeding on Switch.
I feel like you two both think Hollow Knight would be good as the representative of the indie game. Do we put that on there?
Instead of Shovel Knight?
Yeah, instead of Shovel Knight.
Because
I can pretend that we said
I agree
Shovel
those
Knight.
are the two games to represent those arguments. I think the difficulty we're having is about whether it's about Nintendo's relationship.
They're both knights.
Nintendo's relationship with indies from the year 2010 to 2017, or are we talking about
this is the last 10 years, right? Like, this is the entirety of Nintendo's last 10 years. Much as Hollow Knight is excellent,
but again, I think they could both make it.
They could. Well, Bill, what do you think of these other ones that are on the not locks list? Any passionate picks here?
I think Mario Maker needs to be on there.
Yeah, I see the argument for Mario Maker.
The rest of them, I think, are very interesting and obviously fantastic games.
Yeah.
But I don't know why I put it on there twice. But Mario Maker needs to be on there, I think. Yeah, I put Mario Maker on that list twice, not on purpose.
That's how important it is. Is this list then Shovel Knight and Mario Maker as the last two?
My vote would be the two Knights.
The two Knights would be your vote?
I mean, I wouldn't vote for Shovel Knight personally, but it's probably what I would vote for out of that lot.
Yeah. I would say Shovel Knight. And I could see Mario Maker. I could see it. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I like the idea of Mario plus Rabbids, but I think... And that is a cool, like, Nintendo working with another company. Yeah. That's the only other one that I would be like, this kind of represents a cool thing that's important, I think, for the future of Nintendo. But again, I don't think we've fully seen the repercussions of Mario plus Rabbids, because we've got, Cadence of Hyrule, maybe some other stuff. Like, I guess the Warriors games, like Hyrule Warriors, even happened before that. So they were always doing this type of thing, even back in the day when they were letting Capcom make Zelda games on Game Boy. But
yeah,
I feel like a good compromise is Shovel Knight and Mario Maker.
Valley, you okay with that?
I'm outvoted. That's fine. Yeah, I think Mario Maker is a good shout out of the rest of those picks.
We'll say Shovel Knight, but Bally, you can just pretend that we said Hollow Knight.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty much the same.
I pronounced it wrong with my weird American accent.
Yes, that's how it'll go. Cool. So the list is Mario Maker, Shovel Knight, Mario Odyssey, Super Mario Run, Skyrim, Mario Kart 8, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, Fire Emblem Awakening, Splatoon, and Breath of the Wild. And, we're not ordering them, but I think Breath of the Wild is probably number one. I think it's pretty obvious.
I think so.
But yeah. Cool, that was fun. I mean, there's definitely lots of Nintendo games, and I think a lot of, you can see from this list that, the last few years have been very important for them, obviously with the Switch and these games, but even something like Mario Kart 8, that is a game that has spanned 6 years at least. It was 2014 it came out, and just still every week in NPD you see Mario Kart 8 in the top 10 somewhere. It doesn't stop selling, so good stuff.
It's such a gorgeous game too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I'm very interested in finding out what the listeners think of this list.
Sure, yeah. It's one of those lists where I think that some of my picks I chose, I think I chose them more for the reasons of they represented something rather than how important the game itself was. And I think like you have to have kind of a totality of stuff, right? Like the game has to be itself important, but also has to have some wider repercussions. And I think most of these fit that bill pretty well. So I feel like we did a good job here, as best a job as we can in limited time and, limited patience in terms of arguing non-stop.
We should come back to this question in a decade.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. That's a good idea. Come back and remake it again and see if we made any mistakes, right? Like, would we say that something like Ring Fit should be on this list in 10 years' time?
Cuphead is going to look real good in 5 years' time.
Well, yeah, depends on how the Xbox stuff goes, but that could be the canary in the coal mine.
Microsoft packs in as a company just to run Game Pass on Switch in the next 5.
Yeah, exactly. Great. Well, I guess that's going to wrap things up for the show today. So thanks everyone for listening. Thanks so much, Bill, for coming on, being a guest on the show.
It was fun.
Please plug yourself. Tell people where they can find all your wonderful things, all your podcasts and everything.
So all of my podcasts are found wherever you download podcasts. So again, that's Nintendo Switchcraft, comes out 4 days a week. It's a shorter show. It's not like one of these super long episodes. Shorter show, 4 days a week. Stadia Cast comes out once a week. 143 Pixels comes out once a week. And look forward to listening to Bally on 143 Pixels. And you can find all of my stuff at runjumpstomp.com, or I stream on Twitch at twitch.tv/runjumpstomp. And I have a YouTube channel, youtube.com/runjumpstomp. And thank you guys for having me on. This was a blast. And I've been listening to your show for 6 years.
Oh, wow.
It was really exciting to come on.
Fantastic.
Thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. And I'll put all those links in the description so you can find all that stuff and go listen to me talk about Metroid Fusion. That was fun because that's a game that I haven't really talked about on this show because it was so long ago. It's pre-podcast, and it's one of my favorite games ever. So actually digging into it and talking about the minutiae was great. That was a lot of fun. Excellent. And we'll be sure to plug Bally Show when that goes up in season 3. It'll be very good. Mm-hmm. Excellent. Let's plug all our stuff and get on out of here then. You can find obviously this show in various places. We're on Spotify, we're on Stitcher, we're on Alexa. Just shout at your Alexa and tell it to play our podcast. It should listen to you, hopefully. It listens to everything else, so might as well. And you can find us on Twitter. We have our podcast Twitter, which is at TNL Podcast. And you can find me at LordNBZ. Where can they find you, Bally?
I'm on Twitter at Ballyman91, at BALLYMAN 91.
And I'm at Run Jump Stomp.
Fantastic. And we have people who are supporting the show. If they go to patreon.com/thisnintendolife, and we have some people we want to thank.
Yes, thank you to our 2 $10 tier patrons. They are my fiancée Caroline and Atari Alex. Thank you for your support. And thank you to all of our other patrons. It's hugely appreciated. We just put out an episode of TNL Takes all about mobile phones, which was a fun discussion
over the years, how they've come to dominate the universe and our life and everything.
And it ends up very global political, as they always do. So definitely want to check out. So you can download, I think at this stage, 28 episodes for $5 if that's what you do wish to do.
Fantastic. Excellent. You can listen to old episodes hopefully as they go up. Update on that is I will be uploading all of those old episodes manually, so it'll take a while, but hopefully we should have a full...
But most of them are there.
Yeah, most of them are there now, so we'll hopefully have a full complete feed that you can peruse at your leisure eventually. But I think that's going to close us. Any last things that I'm missing? As always we get to this point, I'm like, have I forgotten? There's so many things to talk about. I guess look forward to our E3 2020 show, which that won't be cancelled. We'll still do one of those, I guess, depending on what happens. But yeah, thanks again, Bill, for coming on. And I guess that's going to close us. We will see you very soon. Bye-bye, folks. The musical interlude used on today's episode was the main theme from Ori and the Will of the Wisps, copyright Microsoft and Moon Studios 2020.